Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome to what? The second episodes of Undercurrents. Yes, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Great to see everybody out there in the chat. Got quite a few people here, which is great. And of course, we always expect more coming in. So today is an incredibly important show. Probably, Eric and I have talked about this, probably one of the most important shows, if not the most important show we've ever done. And this includes the 2 years that we spent in Son of Sam. In fact, the 2-year anniversary is coming up very soon, March 17th, 2023. It'll be 2 years since all of us first met. So today we have an action and information-packed show, which is, of course, dealing with the ideology and the people behind the Seton Park Dome. And let me tell you something. What we're finding is making us very, very uncomfortable. So since we have so much to get to today, incredible amount of information that Eric and I have prepared for you this week, and because we are looking so forward to getting to that information, I am going to forego a long intro, and we will get the man of the hour in right about now. So everybody, as you all know, it ain't about me. It's about we. So everybody put your hands together for the man, the one, Moet. You want to stay in your seat for this one. The only Eric Galati. Yes, Eric.
Yes,
how are you?
The only Manny Grossman, or as I affectionately call you, Luis Manuel.
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
Okay. This is going to be a hell of a show. I find it intriguing. There's nothing conspiratorial here, but I find it sad. I'll just succinctly say as we go along, you're going to see how people wanted to stop narcotics, and it was narcotics with children. And today, 2023, we have worse drug addiction than ever in the history of America and perhaps elsewhere. And I was speaking to my wife, and I said, why would this dome project be start and then suddenly end? And she says, well, it's the law of unintended consequences. And believe it or not, there's going to be an important file you pulled, which confirms something. Now, I just want to say quickly to you people, Manny and I have made many interviews with people. It's fantastic. Manny alone did an over 2-hour film video interview with Mr. Tom Martin, who was
We're going to show an excerpt of that today, actually.
And then Manny and I together by telephone, it was the third time we got in touch with Tom Martin. We did 2 visual discussions with Mr. Alphonse Gavila, and by telephone, Miss Mary Ellen Gibbs. Very informative about the narcotics scene. She knew what she was talking about because her father had been in law enforcement.
Eric, one before you continue, she also had a Son of Sam story. So we're getting
she had a Son of Sam story, and it's true,
a real one. And so, but we're gonna let her tell that when we get Mary Ellen.
Mr. Mark Barron, what a great guy! I mean, the way he described building the dome, and then later on, we're going to see how exact he was, Manny, as we read through this about Buckminster Fuller and how the dome can easily be put together. And we spoke to Mrs. Eichel Gruenbaum, who will be our guest tomorrow evening, twice by telephone. She was Mistress Michelle Gruenbaum, one of the child actresses and dancers. And we spoke to Mr. John Scanlon, who was at the Dome, Manny and I together. Now
he'll be on next week.
He's on next week. Now, I alone have had some fantastic telephone conversations. I just went gung-ho. I want to thank you, Mrs. Susan Edelsack Cole. She just knows as Susan, Pyzer's wife. I spoke 3 times to her. She has been very gracious, but because of our first show, Manny, and the long comment by Mr. Richard Lee Stein, whom you knew at Riverdale as Richie Stein, it's as if there's a misunderstanding that we're trying to subvert things, and we're not.
Oh yeah, his
You
his
know,
comment his comment got several things wrong. One, he said that we accused them of doing psychological experiments on kids. We never did that. We're just
no,
asking about the mental health issues, the
that
mental health professionals behind the dome. And he also said Pizer's voice was not at the beginning of that film. Well, we spoke to 3 people since then who all have confirmed that yes, indeed, it was Pizer's voice. Where I do want to make a correction, where Richie Stein brought me to task, was in reporting that Scott Redmond had died of a heroin overdose. I had heard that. I was just reporting what I heard from somebody. But
should we say
it
who
looks,
it was?
huh?
Should we say who it was? He didn't mean it maliciously.
No, let's leave out who it was, but we definitely heard that. But the consensus is that Scott Redmond died of cancer, and so I would like to apologize to the Redmond family, of course, and correct that one error that we made. So thanks to Richie Stein for pointing that out to us. But the rest of his comment was extremely off the mark, and
I
yeah.
answered him paragraph for paragraph, and then you concurred. And I wasn't angry with him. I like the man. I like Susan. Susan, actually, God bless you. She picked up the phone and then would call me back, and she said, I spoke to Richard Stein. He wants to speak with you all about the dome. She went out of her way to do that. She also phoned Lisa Rifkin. Now, I spoke for over 2 hours on the telephone, and then we transferred to Zoom, 2 hours with Richard Lee Stein, a great guy. He was lovely, and he even informed me how Pizer came to be introduced to the geodesic dome from a book called The Dome. Now, then I was looking for Kathy G, a child actress, and yes, she is Chinese American, and it ends up she's the wife of Mr. Tom Martin. So that's the second time Tom Martin is contacted by telephone. I spoke to the psychologist or mental health worker, lovely lady, Dr. Judith Birch. Her son.
Now hold on. Are we sure? Are we sure she's a mental health worker? Because I looked her up, and she just did stuff with dyslexic kids and education.
Right. She worked with children. She
Right.
was kind of a pedagogist who worked with children with dyslexia and everything else. But she was kind enough to give me the telephone numbers of an adult actress, an actress who was there under her married name, Jane Genth, full name Jane Genth Wiley. Genth is a German family, but the Wiley family are one of the prominent old American moneys. She even played tennis at the Dodge home. She was way, way up there with these people. She explained everything to me about the tiers of wealth.
Correct.
I
And
spoke.
she was also a board member of the Riverdale Neighborhood House.
That's right.
Right.
And I also spoke to Mrs. Lisa J. Hart Kirshner. She was not a child there, but her parents, Murray and Ray Kirshner, were. They volunteered, and they were voice thespians in the play by Michael Shapiro, whom Richard Stein said was a boy. He wrote The Adventures of Will Robin. I even spoke, it was hello and goodbye, to the first person I ever found, Eugene Zappi, who's now a big dermatologist. As soon as he heard my name, Eric Galati, I'm afraid I can't help you. Good luck. Goodbye. Now, this happened after Richard Stein commented. I don't know if there's an alarm bell that's going out. One of the first people I called, and who called me back, but I was on the phone with you, and I never interrupt with caller identification unless it's a planned call, is Mrs. Gina Eduardo Pressman, who as a child was Mistress Gina Pressman, an actress. She called me back, but she's never responded again. I don't know what's happened. Lisa Rifkin, thank you, Susan. I had an almost 2-hour conversation with her. I love this woman.
Well, I want to tell you though why we think maybe an alarm bell went off, because I called Lisa Rifkin after you did, like a day or two later, and you told me, Eric, that you were on the phone with Lisa Rifkin for like over an hour and had a great conversation with her.
Yeah, she said, this is what she said to me. I want you to come and walk around, and I wanted to cry because I still haven't regained the muscles in my legs. She says, I'll take you in my car. You can sleep overnight at my home, and I will even make you delicious food with wine.
Now that's what Lisa Rifkin told you. Now everybody, this is what she told me when I called her back 2 days later. She said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea what you mean. Dome, never heard of the dome. And then she basically hung up on me.
Yeah. So
So
this. So I don't know why she's fearful. She even told me about how I could get acupuncture on my Medicare Medicaid insurance. A great gal. In fact, she asked me, "What do you do, Eric?" What I said, well, my real vocation, I'm a thespian. And she goes, ah, you're a thespian and I'm a lesbian. So and also, she has not acknowledged Alphonse Gavila, who tried to get in touch with her because they were boyfriend, girlfriend. And it was all very innocent. It was all a very innocent thing. Then another lady that Judith Birch put me in touch with, she's even more elderly than Jane Genth Wiley, and God bless her, is Cecilia Kornfeld. Maiden name, an interesting Louisiana name, Sysirth. And Cecilia Kornfeld, her husband was Richard. They ran the Riverdale Playhouse in conjunction with being with the Riverdale Neighborhood House. They have a life that anybody would envy. After World War II, they lived in the 50s in beautiful south of France and then in Florence. That was a time to live in Europe. Great people. And then this is the thing, once again, no response. Susan said, Eric, you've got to speak to Ellen Mintzner. She took over as the directress when Pizer left. And she's now Mrs. Ellen Starr Mintzner. She wanted to speak to me, but after that, maybe the comment by Richard after that show, 5 or 6 calls to her cell phone from my telephone, she won't answer. It's a great shame. It's a great shame. And there's other people I'm trying to look for. And I just want to say to everybody, we have not left off from the Alfred Hunt Howell murder case, because that's how we got involved with this, because Howell's wife, Ruth Howell, wrote the book, the literary part. The photographer, again, was Arlene Strong.
correct.
Arlene Strong was the photographic authoress. Full name, Howell Ray. And we have not left off, but I'm not going to speak about anything. I am doggedly going after Karen Ann Wallstrom and trying to find people, and I may be lucky to have. So let's get on with the show.
Yeah, we just want to let people know that if anyone does have an issue with our reporting, and that's what we're doing, we're reporting, we're not accusing, we're not making any accusations, we're not making any conclusions. We are reporting what we're finding, actually, strangely enough, or ironically enough, directly out of the Riverdale Press. So hold on, I'm having some issues here with my stream. Uh-oh, they're sabotaging us, Eric.
I've seen you.
No, we're good. We just want to say, if anyone has any problems, this is an open forum. We would love for you guys to come on the show and tell your side of the story. In fact, Eric, Eichel Gruenbaum, is coming on tomorrow, and she's such a lovely person, and we get along great with her. But she basically said, you guys are full of shit. I mean, I'm paraphrasing her, right? But we're so open to this. We want to have this dialogue. But Eric, as we are about to hit the audio, having some issues, Eric. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm patient. Yeah, and we want to know something, that we have not made any accusations. We just, when we speak to somebody, we give the full story. Manny and I have not brought up anything negative about Pyser, Sherman, Edelsack. It's not us. There are some people who were there who brought it up. We're not looking for anything. We're not part of the social media that wants to be insanely antagonistic, angry, like a person when they go to drive. Statistically, right, people psychologically become aggressive on the road. We're not like that.
Right, exactly. We want to find out answers, but we are filtering this story through the lens of our unique perspective, which is, first of all, we came to this from true crime. We came to this from a story of Son of Sam, which involved child trafficking, murder, cults, elite, children, Untermeyer Park, Van Cortlandt Park. That's the lens we're filtering this through. And of course, we're filtering this through 50 years of knowledge that we've gained as, well, critics of the empire, critics of the system, critics of the intelligence services, critics of the CIA, critics of these weird psychological and mental experiments that they love to perpetrate on people. So anyway, I'm dealing with some.
We could go back to the British East India Company and the opium trade, because when the British Parliament made it illegal, that's when all these mafias get involved, and you start to have pushed on people the drug culture in various stages.
Right, and we're going to get into that as well. So we have a lot to deal with today. Let's just get right into it. Pyser Edelsack and the Dome People, Part 1. And please forgive me, guys. I'm having some streaming issues. I don't know exactly what's going on. So
we'll be patient. And yes,
yeah.
Company, it's the second spelling for Kirchner. She's German.
Right. And she really had nothing to do with this. Her parents were just volunteer actors, and she had really no idea what was going on. And Simone Nyman is definitely onto something with social engineering. And I think we're going to make a good case for that was what going on at the Dome today. So let's just get right into it. Well, it all starts here. It all starts here in this little blurb, little, what do you call it? Pull out little sectional in the Riverdale Press in 1971, a long, long time ago, 52 years ago, in fact. And congratulations, Riverdale Mental Health Association, for a job well done. And interestingly enough, the second page of this brings up some issues. The quiet revolution in mental health services. So, Eric, what are we seeing here? We're seeing, this is first of all by Elliot Richardson, Secretary, Department of Health, Education and Welfare.
Now, this is during the presidency of Richard Nixon.
Correct. And first of all, we want to go down to the bottom because we have Pyser Edelsack's name associated with this, Judy Birch, who we talked about. Who else?
There's Cecilia Kornfeld, whom I spoke to.
Cecilia Kornfeld right there. We have
the Reverend Dr. William A. Teague. Was he the predecessor to Ultan?
Correct. William Teague was the predecessor Bronx historian to Ultan, who we had the other day. We have
there's a prominent family, the Gaynors. The whole family is involved.
We have Mark Barron, who we spoke to. We have
the Hebrew name given is Fritz, if it's the same, Mark Fritz Barron.
Right. We have Lisa Rifkin, who we spoke to, and so on and so forth. So
and Nina Jones, who I've been told about, and I told you her father was Clarence, and we found out from Mark Barron he was an attorney at law for the Reverend Martin Luther King.
Yeah, in fact, we heard how they used to hang out, and Martin Luther King and Clarence Jones used to hang out and tell dirty jokes while drinking together. So that was kind of an interesting story. And then, of course, real quick though, and then here at the bottom, just again, bringing our bona fides up, we are particularly grateful to Mr. and Mrs. David Stein, Richard Stein, and the staff of the Riverdale Press for their invaluable help and great generosity in making this supplement possible.
That's good, but look above. After the name of Dr. Herbert B. Wilcox, medical doctor, this proves what Alfonso Gavila has told us. There were people involved in medicine, possibly psychology and psychiatry there. And we're not trying to say anything negative.
But this isn't necessarily about the Dome, though, Eric. We have to be told.
But look at the members.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with
of the elite, of members of the clinical staff. Also
contributed much of their time to assisting in the preparation. So this is basically a product of the Riverdale Mental Health Organization, which, by the way, was started and seemingly in conjunction with all these elite families that we're talking about, the Dodge, YMCA, Ethical Culture Society. Now, this is all about how there's a quiet revolution going on in mental health services. Mental health services in the United States are undergoing a quiet revolution. This can be seen most dramatically by the fact that the numbers of patients in psychiatric care is declining. It is? I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. And so we're not going to read this whole thing. It talks about how community mental health centers were beginning to open up all over the American landscape. This was something
I highlighted, though, the first sentence of the 5th paragraph on the left column.
Okay.
Community mental health centers are different from other mental health facilities, not only because of the services they I better read it from there.
I'll read it because I'm a little
Because of
quicker.
their sensitivity to the mental health needs of their communities. Why is there suddenly this breakdown in our society that grows after World War II? That's crazy. Then the next one, unlike other mental health facilities, a community mental health center is responsible directly or indirectly for the mental health needs of all the people living within its area of concern. Now, this is like creating a kind of collective.
Well, also, who assigned these people to be our judges? You know what I'm saying? Like, why are these people judging my mental health? I should look at their private lives and see what's up with them. I bet you I'd find some interesting things. But this is weird to me.
Yeah, well, it is because we're looking at it retrospectively and what the result is. Now, go to the second paragraph in the middle, the last sentence about delinquency.
Where's that?
Right there, the second paragraph that begins as it expands. Yeah.
So as it expands, the community mental health center
on delinquency, Manny, but you can read it all if you want.
Okay, delinquency, disruptions in family life, and alienation are increasingly viewed as breakdowns in community mental health and therefore a vital concern to mental health people. We are no longer above or beyond these problems, but rather in the heart of them where we belong. That's interesting because you could read this another way. The same networks creating these mental health institutions, like these community mental health centers, which never existed before. One could argue that their same networks were responsible for the breakdown in mental health of the youth of America, because the youth of America were being given messages through the media, which these people own and operate, of breakdown of the family, distrust the man, take free drugs, have sex everywhere. Of course, that's going to create all sorts of mental health problems.
And the second period of rock and roll from 64 on, different from the original, where, hey, we got a revolution. Yeah. And these people are making millions of dollars. They're telling people to break all the rules of and ethics of life.
Right.
And when Sonny and Cher, who were the biggest rock and roll duo after the Everly Brothers, said, stop taking narcotics, their career suddenly ended because they made that announcement. You mean 1 million people stopped buying their records? No. The business prevented them from going forward. Many people don't realize that. They were stopped back at the height of their career in the 60s. Look at Sigmund Freud.
Well, Eric, I was just going to say on that note real quick that, yeah, it's clear that the mental problems were created by the very networks that are now trying to come into the neighborhoods to solve them. And so we're gonna see that. Yeah, Sigmund Freud. I'm reminded of Dr. Africa, who called him sick man Freud.
Yeah, so, Freud is, you see, the problem is this, no doubt with industrialization and everything, things happen mentally to the people when they start to go into these cities and everything. And there is a lot of abuse. You just have to study England, for example, and the way people lived in the north of England, even into the 80s. It's horrendous. And he's seeing something. He's observing something. Yes, even the poor should have psychological help, just as they get physical help. But the problem with Freud is that he's like, you take Christ and you turn him upside down. I mean, Freud, everything was sex. Everything was
these weird projections that he had in his own mind, and he's projecting on the rest of humanity about the id, and he makes up these weird fairy tales, to use Dr. Lila Africa's comparison, about Oedipus. He uses a weird Oedipus fairy tale to explain the minds to people. It's just all strange. But Eric, this is the thing that disturbs me the most about this page, this headline. The quiet revolution in mental health services. First of all, I have two questions. Why was a revolution needed in mental health services? And secondly, why keep it quiet?
That's right. Why was it quiet? Who invented the term quiet revolution? Because Sigmund Freud is not being quiet. These are in his archives. It's out in the open for all to see. And then the question is, who titled this page? Is this the Riverdale Press?
This is the Riverdale Press. Now, I have a couple of...
Who gave the title? Is this what Department of Health, Education and Welfare Secretary Elliot Richardson called it? Or is this a title given to what Richardson wrote?
That's a great question, and although we can't say definitively who wrote that headline, I must say that it is very curious to me, both the style of this writing and also the topic. And we're going to talk about the style of writing first. Eric, I'm just going to come out and say it. This writing in all block letters and thick font with black and all capitals is very reminiscent of this right here. The communists, workers and oppressed people of the world unite. Mass resistance to police repression grows in Southwest. There's that same block lettering. And it is down here. Normal newspapers don't do this. Okay.
No.
And here's another one. The national proposal to build the anti-Baki movement. All right. But even
Now,
further.
The Baki movement, in case people want to know, Alan Baki in California went to the Supreme Court. He had the highest grades to enter university. He was being refused because they were putting in minorities who didn't have very good grades. And the communists went berserk when the Supreme Court, I think unanimously, voted in his favor, still saying they were for racial quotas. But they voted in this white man's favor, and the communists went berserk. Not black people. The communists went berserk.
Oh, it sounds very much like today because BLM.
And it became a massive movement that we don't know about. This is unheard of. So I looked it up. It's Alan, B-A-K-K-E.
All right, let's move on, because it also is very reminiscent of this. Now, this is again Stephen C. Rhea, current member of the Dodge Foundation, a member of these families from Riverdale. Now, I don't think that he's from Riverdale. I think he's related to these people by marriage or birth. But look at this, all block letters. Look at this filth. I mean, this is absolute spiritually sick filth.
And to be meticulous, why is a Celtic American of old British money writing in Spanish? Well, I'll tell you why, because they go down to Latin America to manipulate them.
Eric, there's a historical comparison to be made. In the 1850s, and we heard it from Lloyd Ultan, the Dodges were going all over the world seeking copper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mining, destroying mining the communities by going in and digging up. Now what they're doing is they're through with that. Now they're destroying communities and entire countries with ideas. And this idea here needs to be completely and roundly rejected. This is spiritual filth and sickness, and I don't understand why a uber wealthy industrialist is trying to spread this stuff to my people down in Latin America about decolonizing your ideas, sex and gender, or social. What does that even mean? And then look at this, and look at this filth.
Yeah, it's weird. It's sick. It's not Pablo Picasso's art. It's really weird. But now it's out in the open.
Right, but
this manipulation in Latin America, like your specific country of your mother, Puerto Rico, was taking place with Cardinal Spellman and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's what Randy Engel discovered. They've always been down there. There's no such a thing as a third world, and they're manipulating it. And it's there. It's there. And in Colombia, my best friend comes from one of the most elite families. The Spanish do not control Colombia. It's foreigners, and there's many British who can even be in the Colombian parliament. So this is an outcome of it, Manny.
Yeah, and this has got to stop. I'm sorry, because what they're doing, and again, tying this back to the whole mental health, these people are involved in mental health. So they create the problem, they create the mental problem, they get people to think that you can change your gender, and then these people become totally mentally ill with this stuff. And then they come in with their mental health services to give people the drugs to solve the problem that they themselves created. And I think that that's what's going on, and what was going on in Riverdale to a certain degree. But check this out. Look at what we found searching through the archives. Turns out that the elite Buddy Stein, who lives in one of the most exclusive communities in Riverdale, Fieldston, in a beautiful private house, whose parents were financed into existence, and the Riverdale Press was financed into existence by the Dodge family of Riverdale through the auspices of the Riverdale Neighborhood House. Oh, look, he just happened to be on a completely communist, totally subversive editorial board. of a newspaper called The Movement, which came out in the 60s in San Francisco. And if you don't believe me, here's his name right here. Okay. So
he was known as Buddy. You knew him as Buddy, but by birth Bernard.
Now look at the headline. Does that look familiar to you?
Yeah.
Same exact font as this right over here. Now, I'm not saying Buddy Stein did this. I'm not making that connection.
No.
But what we are doing is finding curious things in the historical record and asking questions about them. So this guy has a lot to answer for. And Eric, you and I are going to do a show on this whole movement magazine. And why is it that Buddy Stein comes from this elite family of Dodge funded people, lives in this beautiful house, and meanwhile he's spreading anti-white, anti-capitalist, anti-police, anti-societal filth in the 1960s out in Berkeley. And sorry, it's not just youthful indiscretion. I wonder what the hell was going on. And Buddy, hey, come on the show and talk to us about
come on
this.
The show, both you and your brother. We want you on.
Because in a recent laudatory piece in the Riverdale Press about the storied career of Buddy Stein, they make no mention of his tenure at the movement. In fact, quite the opposite, Eric. They quoted him as saying that when he took over the Riverdale Press for his parents in the late 70s, he said that he felt like a fraud. Why do you feel like a fraud, Buddy? You spent almost a year at the Movement magazine on the editorial board. You weren't a fraud.
And you were a great researcher. He's one of the foremost experts in the world on Mark Twain.
Right. So will the real Buddy Stein please stand up? What was he? An elite funded a capitalist or a communist subversive working for the Movement magazine? That remains to be seen. We're just making historical connections here. But I looked up the term a quiet revolution in mental health. Now, first of all, notice that a normal newspaper, they don't use all caps. Right? They don't use all caps. That's strictly in the communist stuff. But I found two references, oddly enough, in New York, in Rochester, New York, both in the late 60s. This is December 1st, 1968. And the next example we'll see is like 1969. Since the mid 50s, I think this is very important, Eric, because it uses the same term that we just heard in that headline before. Since the mid-50s, a quiet revolution in mental health has been underway, sparked by exciting discoveries in pharmacology, physiology, and biochemistry. It was advanced by new attitudes on the parts of doctors, government, and public towards mental illness, its treatment, and control. So notice pharmacology is number one. Drugs. This was the pushing of drugs on people. And here they are as well, Saturday, all around the same time period. That article in the Riverdale Press came out in 1971. Here in 1969, we have the church getting involved. The church and the quiet revolution in mental health will be the topic of Reverend Thomas A. Fleming, chaplain at Rochester State. Chaplain Fleming is a graduate of Eastern and Southeastern seminaries and completed clinical training at 2 hospitals in Raleigh, North Carolina.
That's a Protestant church.
So what do you think about what I found here?
I think that what you found is that subconsciously, they're going to think I'm arrogant. Subconsciously, the quiet meant that for years and years and years, what was going on in pharmacology, physiology, and biochemistry, as highlighted there by you in that piece, was going on behind the scenes back to the beginning of the 20th century. Pharmacology, we never knew of the doctor, I believe, in Switzerland who developed lysergic acid diethylamide, which is LSD. We never knew what Tavistock Institute was doing, and we never knew what American intelligence was doing with narcotics until the Church Committee, which told us of MK Ultra. Now, I've never gone into that. I've never even alluded to that, but now there's no reason why I have to be cautious. I think it's all interconnected. And when we get to physiology, this is where we get to even transgenderism and transhumanism. I believe that because I did find the 4A, because 4 of the 7 words begin with A. The American Association for the Advancement of Atheism. They had in 1927 in Manhattan an office with thousands upon thousands of workers there and throughout the country, $2 million in their bank account. You know what $2 million is in 1927? So here we get this elite that would finance these people.
Right. And we're going to see that happening in the Dome.
And one man, George T. Smith, gave $2,000, $10,000 at the time, which is a lot of money today.
Mm-hmm.
In their 1927 report. It's a report that Elizabeth Dillon brought out to a fund. You know what the fund is called? And once again, it's Latin America, the hybridization fund. So people think when you and I say transhumanism and all that, we're crackpots. I have the name Alfredo A. Herrera, a physician biologist in Mexico City, who was the head of the Biological Institute in Mexico City and in charge of natural history. He had a chimpanzee, which was just about to become an adult that was going to have conjugation with a human woman. And do those experiments there to prove what atheists believe, that we come from apes.
Anyway, we're getting a little off topic here.
It's part and parcel. The quiet, it's no longer quiet.
Yes, and you got to wonder whether these mental health groups that were popping up all over communities, especially here in the uber elite Riverdale, started, of course, by the same networks: the Dodges, the Riverdale Neighborhood House, the YMCA, Columbia University. All of these organizations are around this. You got to wonder if there was another agenda at play. We are not saying that there was. So far, everyone who we've spoken to about the Dome has been nothing but pleasant. Mm-hmm. Except for one notable person who will deal with it another time. And so we're just confused because we're seeing all these things with the historical lens of what we know now about MK Ultra and how horrible these psychiatric medications actually are for humanity. And I'm wondering if this was when they first started doing the big push to drug the American mind with these pharmaceutical products.
I saw it in my high school, Lawrence High School. A girl would walk in, middle class, wealthy girl from a wealthy Jewish neighborhood, Northwood. Then she'd say to the nurse, "I'm feeling miserable today." And the nurse actually gave her Quaaludes. I'm going to tell you something I've never told people. I'm a self-taught person. I don't like academics or anything. They sent me to a psychologist.
Really?
My father would have gone berserk.
I just had to go speak to the rabbi. That's all that happened to me.
Well, what happened with me is that I had him in the palm of my hand. I imitated James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, sat there with a red jacket and boots and dramatized my family life.
So anyway, but I also want to put out there that this information, especially to the original Dome people who were only 12 or 13 at the time, is probably coming out of left field and seems absolutely insane. But I just want to say that you might have been a plaything to these people, and you were just 12 or 13. You would have never have known. There might have been another agenda at play that was quiet, because we already see in a headline, these people love being quiet while they do their revolution. And so, just because we're not getting all the stories about, we're not getting any real negative stories, except for two people who have spoken to us specifically about Pizer, where we got horrible stories. And we're going to
the Dome.
Yeah. And that at the Dome, and and one of them is coming on next week to talk about it. The kids might never have known this. Right. So anyway, and even the elites, the people who were in the Riverdale Neighborhood House, might not have known how they were being manipulated by the people above them. So we're not assigning blame. All we're doing is looking at this with through a specific historical lens. So now, enter Pyser Edelsack. All right. So now Pyser Edelsack comes into the scene. So how did this guy from UCLA, right? This guy from California, was not a Bronxite, didn't know the first thing about Riverdale, had no clue about our sociology, had no clue about this neighborhood, as is evidenced by the beginning of the Dome people, where he's making the most ridiculous statements about Riverdale that you possibly could ever make. Now, I'm an OG. I lived in Riverdale my whole life. So if anyone wants to come up with their bona fide, step off, because no one knows this neighborhood. Maybe you know it equally like me, but no one knows this neighborhood like me. All right. Pyser Edelsack was a poser. This guy's coming in. Who is he? We don't know, but we get some answers. So here's another circular from the Riverdale Press. And now this is about drug abuse, and this is about drug abuse in Riverdale, okay? So Alan Dennison, there's the person who we spoke about on our first show, Eric.
One of the elite families.
Right,
Even
he was.
Alan Dennison. And did you write his obituary?
I wrote this guy's obituary,
Right.
and he was friends with the Curlins, with the Dodges, with the Howells. Okay, so we have all of these Cunningham and Walsh, community care. The Riverdale Mental Health Clinic has been a pace setter. It needs your support. Drug abuse everywhere. Fred Friendly from Columbia University School of Journalism. Now, to be fair, my father went to the Columbia University School of Journalism, but he certainly wasn't at the Fred Friendly level. He was just
But you know
student.
who Fred Friendly is?
No.
He's the one who was the big man at CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Right. So all of these people are writing in the Riverdale Press. Now, here's a Dennison Cockcroft. That's the name. That's the way that Hunt Howell Jr.'s wife's name is spelled, with one N, as opposed to this Dennison up here, which is two. So I wonder whether there's any connection there. But in either case, on the second page of this circular, and I'm going to put all this up on my Twitter for you guys to read, because we're all about sharing information here and educating our audience. Pyser Edelsack, friend and advocate of our neighborhood youth. Now, not for nothing, but if I was a father or mother, and this is just an editorial comment, if I was a father or mother, even in 1970, I would never let my child go anywhere near this guy. Okay? Now, I don't know about you out there in the audience. And Eric, I'm not speaking for you. I'm just speaking for myself here. But this dude looks just like a straight up offender to me. I mean, it looks like a mugshot. This doesn't look like a person I'd want around my child. But we have beautiful information here, which could lead us researchers to some areas where we might be able to get some answers. So here's Judy Bursch, who, of course, was in that other mental health Quiet Revolution. She was mentioned there. And Eric spoke to Judy, very, very nice woman from what I heard. Eric recounted the conversation to me. He said she was very sweet. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall on these conversations, but Eric just took extensive notes. And so Judy Bursch writes this article about Pyser Edelsack. When Pyser Edelsack came to Riverdale less than a year ago, now this was written in 1971, he knew little of the community. So there's Judy saying exactly what I just said. He was a poser.
Now,
he had been hired through a grant from the Brez Foundation as a street worker for the Spuyten Duyvil Youth Project under the direction of the Riverdale Neighborhood House and in cooperation with the Spuyten Duyvil Association. By now, he has become widely known among young people as their friend and advocate. Eric?
I must comment now. Now, I asked...
iShell's in the chat, by the way.
Oh, great. I asked Susan, his wife, how did he come to New York from the District of Columbia, where he went after being in India? And it's rather poignant. He loved her, and he came to follow her to New York. And I said, well, how did he first come to Riverdale? She did not really know. And I don't think Richard Stein knew. And he was there before he ever knew Richard Stein. David Stein introduces him. But the thing is that there's something quite important. I think, I'm just putting this forth as a conjecture, that because he was a dynamic fellow and wanting to always work someplace, get someplace, because he had been with the Peace Corps, somebody might have said, work here at Riverdale. We need you in the mental health. Now, Richard Stein had told me that, I believe it was Richard, that it wasn't Susan, that he had a mental health office. I think that makes people think that he was a mental health man. And you and I have questioned, where did this guy get the qualifications to deal with psychology and psychiatry
and children?
Right. And I think that's a wrong term. He is referred in every document, you're going to show up as either a street worker or a youth worker. And that's the way Peace Corps people, some of them worked in other countries. Mm-hmm. So that's my opinion. I think possibly, not to offend him, he might have been a useful idiot from people much higher up. Not that he wasn't it. Maybe. I'm just saying maybe.
The
But
only thing I can think of, Eric, are the two stories. Hopefully, John will tell the first one next week, and then, of course, the one that we were told by a person who didn't want us to name this particular story publicly. I'm holding those in my back
yeah,
pocket because
but
they tell a different story about this guy.
well, the capitalists, the very wealthy elite people, are the ones who use those who put forth socialist, communist, and even Maoist agendas. They use that.
Well,
As
let's get to that. Richard Stein told you straight up that this guy was a socialist, correct?
yes, he said he was a socialist. So I wanted to verify: was he a socialist? As communists often use the word, the Socialist Workers' Party is Leninist Trotsky. They're communist. Socialist Labor Party was another one in America. They had to do with WBAI back in the 60s with the CIA. I know this from a CIA man who was a best friend of mine. That's communist. No, Pizer, he meant a socialist, not a communist like Norman Thomas, the historic socialist leader in this country. So that's what Richard Stein told me. But then this causes something perplexing, which we will come to later on.
Well, I just don't understand why these uber elitists at the Riverdale neighborhood house, who were all financed by Dodge money and incredibly capitalistic copper mining money, would be trucking and hanging around and hiring a socialist to go and influence the youth. It just makes no sense to me.
Unless there's an agenda of control of a community and a center, or on a larger scale like China, control of its natural resources. Remember, one of the people with Dodge, Cleveland Hadley Dodge, and Samuel J. Untermeyer, with President Wilson in 1913, was a Rockefeller. And David Rockefeller sung his praises of Mao Zedong for helping him.
Right.
And so it's at different levels. There is an agenda that these extremely wealthy elites, not all of them have. Whether right wing, left wing, they have an agenda.
Right. And that's what we're exploring in this. Now, here we can clearly see Pyser Edelsack associated with all sorts of mental health, right? Mental health, the quality of life, rich mental health, right? And then we have Pyser Edelsack. So forgive me, Richie, because he mentioned in his comments they weren't doing psychological experiments there. Well, we never said that they were, but we did question the presence of a lot of mental health professionals around this dome project. It makes us wonder if there was another parallel track going on that the kids weren't aware of, but that the people who were in charge, including Pyser Edelsack, were aware of. And again,
Birch asks, what does a street worker do? And in the third paragraph, quotes him. Left column, third paragraph. Up above.
I listen to what the kids want to do. I talk them through it. I act as organizer by setting up the task for the kids doing the talking, get them committed. The kids take it from there. I work with institutions such as Neighborhood House to help in various ways, such as getting park permits or sponsoring a rock concert. Now, how does this outsider from UCLA have such pull with this New York City government that he can get park permits? Even doing this dome took a lot of pull from the city government. But
I think he just fell into a culture that existed, because at the bottom of this page, this quiet revolution goes back to when Fiorello LaGuardia was mayor. That's back in the 30s and 40s.
Right. I guess he was still alive and they got a quote from him. But this is another one that I'm questioning here. So he sums up his analysis as what he sees as the needs of community youth as follows. The need for youth to advocate for themselves within their own community. The need for more intra-community communication between the youth and adults, police institutions, and store owners. The need for more communal activities. Communal. There we go. Communal. Free concerts, community car. Now, why do teenagers in Riverdale need a community car? That makes no sense. And the need for an informal counseling setting in which members of the community, especially youth, would have an opportunity to discuss and seek to understand their problems with their families, peers, school, drugs, and other personal concerns. So here they are. Here he is saying straight up that he wanted to get intimate with the kids, not in a negative way. Please don't misunderstand me, but he wanted to hear about their drug problems, their youth, their personal issues. There's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, Eric. But
Oh, of course. Because well, today, 2023, we still have these problems. Nothing was resolved.
nothing was ever fixed.
And also go back to the third column, the second quotation. Dr. John R. Jones. Read that from within, from the word within. All of a sudden, we are discovering that students whom we did not think had problems are really in need of help. What do you mean they think they had problems and now they need help? Where did this discovery come from?
Yeah.
You're the headmaster at a school, and now all of a sudden,
what changed in 1968 where all this was necessary? I mean, I have an idea, which was the complete breakdown of all the American institutions towards and getting us set up for the modern era of complete servile and servitude to the high elites of the world, and which are supranational. But it seems like it was all beginning here in the late 60s with these mental health institutions and community centers that started to, in my opinion, really bend the minds of the people they came in contact with.
And it coincided with the drug culture increasing and increasing and increasing.
Correct. Nothing got better.
In the breakdown of once upon a time, only soldiers coming back from World War I or World War II. In World War I, they called them dope fiends. They became addicts going abroad.
Right.
Now it comes back, and from the soldier, it comes down to your child.
Right. And this was rampant in Vietnam. And of course, we know that the CIA was involved massively in smuggling heroin back. So it seems like the elite was trying to fix the problems that they themselves were creating, make money on you on the way up and make money on you on the way down.
It's so stranded, and that's
exactly
for patience.
So we found this on the Brez Foundation, because remember, guys, Pyser Edelsack came to Riverdale on one of these foundation grants. Okay, and again, just to show it to you right here, he has been hired through a grant from the Brez Foundation as the street worker for the Spite and Diable Youth Project. Okay, that sounds ominous, the Spite and Diable Youth Project. I was a Spite and Diable youth. I didn't need anybody to create a project for me. I had perfectly great time. I had my friends. We had the woods. We built forts, tree houses. We used our imagination. I never came across a mental health professional. And my life turned out relatively just fine. In fact, I have none of these psychological hangups that these weirdos have all over Riverdale, and we'll get to that in a second. But the Brez Foundation, which is actually very little known about it, incorporated under the laws of the state of New York in 1917, its purpose is to distribute in the city of New York and vicinity the income of its principal for charitable work, including hospitals, orphan asylums, relief associations, homes for the helpless, and other charitable institutions as donations which are decided upon and voted by the board of directors. The Brez Foundation is self-sustaining and does not solicit any contributions. So the board of directors is here, okay? John D. Brez. I can't find anything about this guy online.
I've only found two names with Brez, Mel Brez, and then there's a woman who started a jewelry business, Elaine or Eleanor Brez in Florida. But I don't know if they're related.
Right. So this Brez Foundation is extremely elusive, extremely non-populated with board of directors. There's like two board of directors as a contrast from the same book. Here's some of the foundations right after the Brez Foundation, and it's filled with governing committees, officers, trustees, donors, staff, board of managers. But the Brez Foundation is this little thing, which, like, I don't understand.
But it's well known, Manny, because I can't find what I had found. There is a Swiss charity foundation that goes back to the 1800s who gave money to assist the Brez Foundation. And they have a box file that you can look into, and I cannot find them anymore on the search engine.
So here's Sam Smith, who always has a good comment. Funding from various, quote, foundations, unquote, allowed the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic to exist. So it sounds like, Sam, this was coordinated. Foundations were funding these mental health initiatives, which, in my opinion, didn't do much to help the mental health. But here's of the areas that they were working at. But here is something about the Brez Foundation here. And it seems, Eric, as if the Brez Foundation was doing this work that Pizer did as early as 1965. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The success of the consultation the clinic provided to other programs under the agency's administration led the East Harlem Youth Committee in 1965 to request that consultation be extended to other youth-serving agencies in the community. A grant was obtained from the Brez Foundation to make possible the employment of a community mental health consultant under the clinic's aegis on a demonstration basis for 3 years. This kind of sounds like Pyser Edelsack. It's not him.
It makes sense, though. If you go back to Elliot Richardson's article about these mental health institutes all through America, that takes a lot of money, these alternative psychological psychiatric centers. That takes a lot of money. They're all through the country, and wealthy people, very wealthy, are involved. Abigail, the mother of Abigail Folger, was involved with the Hyde-Ashbury project.
Right. And so and to complete even more circles, to the extent that we're making any circles here, but we are making connections that I guarantee no one in Riverdale has ever seen before. Here's a Brez Foundation grant associated with Columbia University and psychiatric experiments. So a simple experimental device for the prediction of outcome of insulin treatment in schizophrenia. Okay. So here it is, authors and affiliations, Columbia University. Okay. And this investigation has been aided by a grant from the Brez Foundation. The study emanates from the Department of Psychiatry at Columbia University. So there's the usual suspects again. Columbia University, associated highly with Dodge, Howell, many of these people. I believe
the
Judy.
Rockefellers. That goes back to when you had behaviorism. They called it in Austria. Behaviorism, it was called in America, and the Rockefellers, to prove that they were not robber barons and bad against the mudslinging journalists, financed it. They would finance anybody who asked for money just to show on record that they were giving charity, and that was the center of it. And Nelson Rockefeller was, in a way, a victim of that type of psychiatric education there. He could hardly read very well.
Right. And everybody should do yourselves a favor, especially if you need a book to fall asleep to. Keep it next to your bedstand. But no, I'm not kidding. I do have this book next to my bedstand to help me fall asleep.
One of the most important that one should have in their library.
But it is one of the most important books you could ever get. And it was written in 1953, and it's about these foundations and their power and influence. This is something that the modern American mind has not come to grips with, that these foundations that exist out there, most of them are socially engineering us, and they're doing it for nefarious purposes. Okay, the Ford Foundation, they are responsible for Ocean Hill-Brownsville debacle in 1968, which pitted the Jewish teachers against the Jewish community against the black community in New York City. And New York City still has not recovered to this day from the social ramifications of Ocean Hill-Brownsville. All an experiment by the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Dodge Foundation. We just see what they're doing with their board of directors, spreading the spiritual filth to Latin America about decolonizing your agenda. So we just learned about the Brez Foundation, and there's two interesting passages that I want to read from this book. Okay. And this is a little weighty. This is a little dense. Okay. So we're talking about from here, and they're talking about the ideas of the foundations. Okay. Wealthy organizations beyond public control have become concerned over the danger of foundation support of various undesirable concepts and movements having political implications. Now, let me just comment here editorially. The reason why this is important is because Eric and I are going to talk about the political indoctrination that went on at the Dome in a very one-sided way towards the children. And so there is definitely were political implications with this Dome project. Absolutely, 100%. We're going to prove it today.
You're exactly right, because what is a foundation? It's like the foundation of a building, but then you build up from it with a purpose.
Correct. And among these
psychological construction.
Right. Among these undesirable concepts, among these are the ideas of the welfare state, the principles of economic determinism, excesses in the promotion of progressive education. This was written in 1953, by the way. The impairment of our national sovereignty, and even subversion. Okay. So now the next paragraph, though, says it much more succinctly and much more clearly. My concern is with the cultural and intellectual aspects of foundation activity. It is in the field of ideas that foundations exert the greatest influence on our lives and on the future of our country. So, case in point, Stephen C. Rea talking about gender is a social construct and decolonize your idea. What does this even mean? But if this is an idea that's coming from a foundation funded operative and it's being spread to my brothers and sisters in Latin America, and I have a feeling it's destroying communities down there just like it's destroyed the communities up here
everywhere, and it's spontaneous. It spreads like a record that sells 1 million copies in a day. Europe, everywhere.
Now check this out, Eric, though, because this brings it even more starkly.
Oh, yes.
Clinic states paddle on community care, and we got this out of the Riverdale Press, 1971, 1972. I'm not quite sure the date. The Riverdale Mental Health Association will hold its annual meeting September 9th. At the meeting, members will evaluate last year's programs and learn of the clinic's future plans of involvement with other agencies. A panel discussion focusing on the network of clinic community care will be composed of Charles Hogan, MD, chairman of the Professional Advisory Committee, Helen Myers, MD, director of the clinic, Helen DeRosis, MD, group leader of the education series, and Pyser Edelsack, youth worker for the neighborhood house.
Once again, youth worker, not mental health worker, youth worker.
And serving on the committee for the meeting are Mrs. Arthur Birch, Mrs. Jane, so that's Judy Birch, who you spoke to on the phone.
That's right.
Mrs. Jane Conliffe, Pyser Edelsack, and okay. So the point is, Pyser Edelsack was intimately involved in foundation-funded mental health work. Okay. Now we can all have our own opinions on whether this is good or bad. Me personally, I'm filtering it through the lens that it was ultimately bad. And as we're going to see, Pizer ended up walking away from the dome and it turned into a disaster. Okay. So you can't tell me that there weren't doctors and psychiatrists around this milieu of the dome. You just can't tell me this, Richie.
We got two of them right there. Three.
Exactly.
MDs, medical doctor.
Right. Pyser Edelsack, Mental Health Association, community care. And this is before the dome. Okay. This is before the dome project.
That's right.
Now, I just want to say that if these groups had done a stellar job of addressing the community, the mental health issues in the community, right? If these people had been a roaring success, well, we would have a very different Riverdale than we have today. But the truth is, this is the Riverdale of today. Okay. A purple-haired libtard wearing Rachel Maddow glasses and the strongest mask you could possibly put on. All right. In 2023, Riverdale was perhaps, and I have direct experience with this because I was canceled by these people. And in a way, I think psychologically, these talks that I'm giving, these shows that I'm putting out, is my way of catharsis to expose the people who destroyed my career and my wonderful life that I had built for myself in a small business for 15 years. These people right here. Okay, this was all over Riverdale. This was the look that I saw walking down the streets in Riverdale, people recoiling from me because I wouldn't wear a mask. The mental health of Riverdale is in shambles. Okay. So you can't tell me, Eric, not that you did, but you can't tell me that these experiments worked with the Riverdale Mental Health Association.
These experiments were a form of a strategy of tension to create chaos.
I agree 1,000%.
Total chaos, total hell on earth.
Exactly. Now, the Riverdale drug scene. This is important to bring up because drugs and the use of drugs by Riverdale's youth were the main impetus for building the dome. Okay. Some people say, oh, drugs had nothing to do with this. No, there was a big drug problem in Riverdale,
Very
including narcotics, right? Like opium, heroin. And we're going to have a dome person tell us this straight up. Okay. So the dome was created ostensibly to get these kids off of drugs. Let's see how that worked out. Well, first of all, let's prove that let's just kind of ease into this. So here's Johnson Avenue, right? And this is the Riverdale Press, 1970. Here's Pyser Edelsack. He was in Riverdale doing his thing 2 years before the dome even was an idea in his head. And there was this problem with teenagers hanging out on Johnson Avenue, which we see later became the reason why they started this dome. They wanted to get a lot of these drug addicted kids off of Johnson Avenue and into a place where they could be more structured and hopefully get off of drugs. So Cold War on Johnson Avenue eased by neighborhood youths. All right. And here we have Pizer right here, hanging out with the cop, the people in the neighborhood. I don't know who they are. Let's see. Officer Charles Fennell, Lily Lippman, just see if there's anybody whose names we recognize. No, but here's Pizer on Johnson Avenue, a mere 2 or 3 blocks from where I grew up.
And technically, it's positive. Everything started to become very dirty back then, Manny. I remember even in Manhattan and places, middle-class people would take their dogs out and leave their droppings, their excrement on the sidewalks. A total selfish breakdown took place. There's nothing wrong with having kids pick up brooms and say, let's keep our community clean. I just want to say this. One of the people we spoke to, Mark Barron, he kind of criticized me for using the word narcotics, if you remember.
Yeah, he did. He was very adamant, Mark Barron.
But we have actual testimony that there was also heroin there.
Right, heroin on Johnson Avenue. Right, so we're not going to read every line of this because it would take forever and it would bore the hell out of you. I am going to be posting this stuff on my Twitter and Facebook. But this is all about here. And Pizer is associated with the drug fighting, right? Frightened parents must fight drugs. Pyser Edelsack has a class in Riverdale Junior High School, which has different meanings to certain people. Our class is involved in environment, study of the community, right? Oh, Mr. Edelsack took our class to Odyssey House. It was like nothing we expected. Most of us expected to see people that didn't look like you or me, but they did. I guess that's a drug treatment. Here we have Pyser Edelsack associated with the seminar talking about drugs, right? So here is the Riverdale Press making Pyser Edelsack out to be one of the biggest anti-drug fighters there is, right, Eric? Am I wrong about this?
Yes, of course. It's definite. Go back to the article by Leslie Fink. It's on the left column right there. And the paragraph that begins, Mr. Edelsack wants to arrange a
center.
Yes, put it up high. Kids could stay during long winter nights and days where drugs won't be the topic as long as there's supervision there. Supervision. We're going to come back to supervision that wasn't there. Parents in the neighborhood have discussed this idea with the neighborhood house, and some object because they think it will only be a place where young people will come in contact with drugs and drug users. There is the ambiguity that actually does take place.
Oh my God, Eric, I totally missed this. You're a freaking genius. This not only foreshadows the dome, but foreshadows the exact problems that the dome had.
Yeah, because there's a polemic. Some say Pizer was always there. We will hear from somebody who say that he was not there. He would only show up to see what was going on. Then over here, when Alfonso Gavila had to leave and people at the dome wanted him back, he did allude to the fact that the parents were concerned because of the way they looked, the way they carried on, that it would be a center of narcotics. And in fact, that is tragically what happened. And that blew away the mind of Tom Martin angrily that did happen.
Now, to be fair, we have to be fair to what Mark Barron critiqued us on. There were distinct periods of the dome. There was this beginning dome people period of the construction, and then there was Pizer leaving, and then the place kind of descending into madness. So we have to deal with that. Now, of course, Mary Doyle said, let's address where the drugs come from and the powers that be who allow them in. Mary, I think you tuned in a little late. We said already, it's the system that brings them in. It's the government bringing them in. We know all this. Gary Webb died for his reporting about how the CIA brought in crack cocaine and from Central America. We know about the heroin going back to the freaking Burma back in 1940s in World War I. So what I said earlier was that these elitists create the problems and then they sell you the solution. And it's basically I think that's what's going on. But Eric, great find here. Let's move on.
Another find of the manipulation of the family, the drug scene, third paragraph down, where it begins, unfortunately, too many crucial elements of this community, its institutions, its parents, its power, still have not acknowledged the potential for self-destruction through drug abuse right here in our own backyard. You can tell me the parents didn't care?
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and then
and look here, and they're talking about heroin here. When a kid takes an overdose, right? You can't overdose on weed, can't overdose on acid. Well, I guess you sort of could, but you can overdose on heroin. So anyway, we have Pizer already in this show. Pizer is inextricably linked to mental health professionals and also as a major anti-drug warrior. Okay. That's how he's being sold anyway. Let's look a little bit more at what's going on here.
Can I just say one thing?
Of course.
It's true in the article by Justin Scheinman on that page. The biggest problem comes in where the same old excuse that nobody wants to get involved. This is typical in all areas where they want this crime to take place. The powers that be show up, they show off, and they don't do anything concrete. And they allow these Pyser Edelsack and all these other people to take control, and they can never really resolve it. It's not the way to resolve it. This is analogous to what Rothstein found in his home country of Minnesota about human trafficking. They all show up, community leaders, cops, politicians, and then nothing.
Right, exactly. It's all about keeping up appearances, and I think that was true in Edelsack's case as well, as we're going to learn from, well, not from me saying it, from people closely associated with him saying it. But here is what looks like coordinated activity on the part of Riverdale Press and Pyser Edelsack on their editorial page in September 24th of 1970. Okay, so the editorial comment is, "We need a youth program." Okay, so there was apparently some Labor Day incident, which I have to research more. It took place on Johnson Avenue, in which 8 youths were taken to the 50th precinct on a variety of minor charges as ancient history. So this is all about, and again, I'm going to put this on my Twitter. This is all about how the kids are all hanging out at the monument here, Johnson Avenue. Oh, here we go, right? Complicating the situation is police awareness that youth gatherings frequently attract dope pushers.
Sure, because the predator goes after after their we call it prey, right?
Right. So this is a direct contradiction to Mark Barron, who told us there was no heroin in Riverdale.
But Mary Ellen Gibbs told us there was.
Mary Ellen Gibbs was adamant about there being heroin everywhere in Riverdale. So I don't know what Mark Barron was, who he was hanging out with. Maybe he didn't see it,
and
but somehow.
Tom Martin
yeah, we're gonna talk about Tom Martin in a few minutes and show his testimony about that.
And actually, so in that article, though, "We Need a Youth Program." That actually is very fair. It's not a typical leftist, I don't know if it's left or right, I hate those terms, but they're not blaming the police. They say, let's not call the police fascist or that we have a police state. They're saying that there wasn't a true type of rapport between those arrested and the police. They're being very fair with the police, but there's something very frightening here. Very, very frightening. Now, here we have youth sitting on the hood of a car. Mark Barron said they would sit on the hoods of cars, and he had his place. But underneath this is really frightening. They gather on bloody. Listen to that adverb, bloody.
Wait, where? Oh, right here. Oh, bloody. Yeah.
Suicide Hill on rainy days to wait for an accident that is sure to happen. This is sick. Look at this. They've never been disappointed. What type of a journalism is this? They've never been disappointed to see a car crash. You don't say, unfortunately, this is always taking place. What's being done about it? They've never been disappointed to see death on the road.
Yeah, I don't get it. It doesn't say this, dear friends, is how local youngsters celebrate. Maybe that could be taken as like a negative thing, right? They're saying it, they're talking about it negatively. I don't know, but
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
find. But
Yeah.
here is, of course, on the same page. And of course, this editorial was written by David Stein, friend of Pyser Edelsack. And then over here, we just happen to have a long youth program for article about a youth program for Spite and Dibble. And here it says again, confirming, with the help of a Brez Foundation grant, Pyser Edelsack has been working at Riverdale Neighborhood House as a community organizer. Now he's a community organizer. And where have we heard that before? With Obama and the disasters of all those years. Okay. Anytime I see community organizer, I want to run as far away as I can the other direction, especially if said community organizer comes from California and doesn't know the first thing about my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not gonna read this whole thing.
Interesting though. Pyser Edelsack writes this, and he speaks of appointing a youth. Somebody has been appointed as a youth worker. Now that I overlooked highlighting, but it's in that column.
Here,
and I'm asking myself, what will be expected of this youth worker? Yes, there it is. He says, we've chosen to place a youth worker in the Spiten-Diebel area. That's above what will in block capitals below. Scroll down, Manny, on that left side, under Pyser Edelsack's. Scroll down more. It begins, see what will?
Yeah.
Okay, above it, he doesn't say he is going to be the youth worker who's been chosen. They've chosen someone. I wonder, was this maybe Ellen Mintzner, who was who we will see was dominant there, possibly even before he left the dome? But who is this youth worker that was chosen? Or is he speaking about himself?
All right, you got a point here. You got a point. That's a good question. I wonder if there was someone else who was going to do this before he was. But this paragraph makes me a little bit worried.
Or Alfonso Gaviria.
Well, I'm not sure. We'll have to talk to Alphonse about that.
Mm-hmm.
Communities exist because people choose to live together and not in isolated cells. Thus, by definition, a community must work together as a group to achieve common goals. Really? No, that's what we have elected officials to do. I don't have to work in America. I don't have to work with a community. Like, this is communist right here. This is him trying to change the definition of what it means to be an American in a very subtle way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, am I wrong about that, Eric? Am I off base?
It's a paradox. I don't think you're wrong. No. What you're talking about is a certain type of negative common goals. But if we're all here and we're going to say we're going to have the 50th anniversary of Meadowmere Park Fire Department, that's a goal to have a good time. You see what I mean? But I know what you mean, and you're correct because of what we have been studying. This is manipulation, and it's
exactly. We wouldn't just say this, but we already know from Richie Stein telling you straight up, Pyser Edelsack was a socialist. And then when we get into the ideology of the dome and what they were teaching the kids and the programs they were doing with the kids, well, it's going to get very interesting.
And he is the social, and he's very good with his words. It's social engineering. He brings out 3 points. The basic design is as follows, and he enumerates it 1, 2, 3 toward the bottom of the left column. It's underneath block capitals. How?
Oh, right here. I got it. Establish relationship with the community. This will facilitate indigenous support and ensure the program's relevancy to the community's needs. First of all, indigenous, that's an elitist looking down upon someone.
maybe he discovered a Native American.
And also, yeah, this is like this is like a manifesto on how they're going to invade. Almost, this is almost like a military guidelines.
Oh, yeah, Look at that. Look, you're right. Look, read the second one. Set up a
communication link between the youth and the institution which provide or have available services for them. This is to facilitate full participation.
Now
Establish
this one, human development. Read it.
Establish and initiate an approach, human development, for working with the youth of the community. This to enable the youth to use the services of the community to the best of their advantage.
Since when is an approach human development? Or does he mean it's just a peculiar way of putting it, human development. So they want these people to develop a certain way, and therefore you manipulate the thought which evolves. And at the bottom, these last two paragraphs are very important. When we get to something you pulled, which
I'm having some issues here.
That's all right. That's all right. Everybody's patient. Don't worry, Manny. It's happened.
Oh man, something's going on.
With patience, my friend. You have it. You're an expert. I don't even have to do any of this.
Hold on. Give me a second. I'm having issues, technical issues.
No problem. It happens. Everybody's patient. It happens to all of us.
I think I fixed it. Hold on. I just have to change my sound settings real quick. I'm having some serious issues hearing today, and issues with this. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Are you
okay?
Sure
I think
a little drone outside your window.
I know. I've never had such technical issues with this stream before. Mm-hmm. I think we're back.
The last two paragraphs are quintessential.
Okay, give me a sec.
It begins these three.
These three areas will all be established by the end of 1 year, term of grant given to Neighborhood House. The mere establishment of these areas is not enough. They can be established, but will they become part of the community? This question is of the utmost importance, for without the commitment on all our parts to establish a permanent program that will be respected by the community and its youth, the money given for this project will be wasted.
Okay, how will program are the two important words. I want everybody to think of the dome project and the word permanent program.
How will this be accomplished? The successful establishment of the Spuyten Duyvil Youth Program will depend on our ability to meet the needs of the youth and not our own individual needs. This is the crucial point where most of the programs of this type fail. We do not intend to fail. Oh, right. Yeah?
Well, keep that in mind, Manny. You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, he's talking about how this is going to be permanent. We don't intend to fail. Okay, let's see what actually happens in the real world. So here's just more stuff about youth and drugs. And this is the first time that in history that the Seton Park Dome is named as and again, it's named in this article directly related to drugs, youth and drugs. Okay, here we go. The outcome of the program, and this is the program by Pyser Edelsack. The outcome of this program was the development of some understanding of the street's problems and the actual building of an annex to Riverdale Neighborhood House, the Seton Park Dome, to be used by young people of the Spuyten Duyvil Johnson Avenue area as a community center, art center, and recreation center. In essence, the goal was to get the kids off the street and to provide various innovative and creative alternatives to hanging out and taking drugs. That's the smoking gun right there, Eric.
Right. Right. But then the paragraph after is very, very interesting.
When looking at the dome's development, no one who was a kid on the street in those days could say that the dome had totally succeeded. Now, this is written. This was written after the dome, actually.
That's right. You see,
but it was a historical document. There are still many problems, including hanging out inside the dome. On the other hand, I feel that the negative, self-destructive, and undirected energies that existed on Johnson Avenue before the dome were 10 times worse. All right, so this is a person who feels the dome was successful, even though they're still saying that there's drug taking going on inside the dome.
And because the drug taking was in the dome after the project dynamic stopped, and Pyser Edelsack had left, And for a while, I'm told Ellen Minsner was the head, according to
Mhm.
Susan, his wife. Uh, well, should we say or should we not say what somebody told us he wanted to do to the dome because they were taking drugs there?
Well, Tom Martin just basically said he wanted to burn it down.
Yes, he crawled underneath, I think, with a book of matches, but he couldn't get the fire going.
Yeah, because he said that the whole thing had gone to hell and it wasn't what it was meant to do, and the whole project had turned 180 degrees around. But actually, that brings us to my next point, because we've been talking a lot about Pyser Edelsack being a community mental health, a community youth person under the auspices of a Brez Foundation grant and hooked up intimately with Riverdale's mental health establishment. Okay.
Mm.
So now we've also then established that the dome was originally sought at as an alternative for kids taking drugs. So I think what we have to deal with, Eric, is this first period, the dome people period, the period when this was directly under Pizer's control. There were lots of kids hanging out building this dome. Let's see let's see how well this anti-drug stuff worked out. And again, I'm going to be reading to set this up an obituary of Pyser Edelsack by none other than his best friend, Richie L. Stein of the Riverdale Press. Okay?
Manny, that
Yeah.
former Youth and Drugs, is that the Riverdale Press also writing what we just read?
This Youth and Drug, yeah, this was all Riverdale Press. Everything we're getting. Yeah.
It's very interesting that it was in the Riverdale Press. And also, there's a paragraph there where a man says, "Fortunately, I had a mother who understood and she pulled me through it." That's what's happening, though. The parents sometimes did not give a damn about the child. That is true. Some of them never cared. Even today, he said, "Oh, they could learn literature in school, but the parents don't make them study." This is a problem. This is a problem.
Right. And you got to wonder about the social dynamics within these families of the original Dome people. Most of them seem to come out of the Riverdale neighborhood house milieu. Quite a few of them were very wealthy. So I just, these are all very interesting questions that we hope to find out more about. So getting back to this, because I want to contrast again, what we're doing is we're setting up, we're being very clear and obvious. I'm setting up bowling pins to knock them down. Why can I do this? Because in our research, we're finding that this was all ideological claptrap, and the reality was very different. Now, this isn't to say if Eichel Gruenbaum is watching, or Mark Barron is watching, or Richie Barron is watching, or any of these kids who were involved in the original project are watching, this isn't to say you didn't have the best time of your lives. This isn't to say that it wasn't a magical experience and it was great. We're not taking any of that away from you. But the simple fact is drugs were rampant at the Dome site. And that in and of itself goes against not only the ethos of the Dome and the original working hypothesis, working idea of the Dome, but it also goes against directly what Richie Stein says in this obituary. And this is the guy, Eric, Richie Stein, who deigned to leave a comment on our last video and basically completely misinterpreted us. So you got to wonder about what's going on with this guy, why he's so bad at interpreting stuff. But this is completely off the mark. Now listen to this. So there was a time when Pyser Edelsack was a household name in Riverdale. Oh, there was. My parents never heard of this guy. Nobody I knew growing up ever heard of Pyser Edelsack. We never heard about this guy. Virtually every teenager and most adults revered him. All right, interesting. So now,
Richard's father did, David A. Stein, because he told me how Pizer would show up with his own press releases and David Stein would publish them. And then he gave a Finn $5 to his son. He says, "Hey, go out to dinner with this guy. You're going to find him interesting." And that's how Richard Stein became best friends with Pyser Edelsack.
Right, but you think he would have known him a little bit better, because he gets a lot of this wrong, according to what we're hearing from the actual kids involved.
I may have an answer after you finish reading this section. From what
so, as a youth worker for Riverdale Neighborhood House in the early 70s, Mr. Edelsack, who died of lung cancer at 71 on Monday, was given the task of, quote, cleaning up, unquote, the Johnson Avenue shopping strip and the monument at West 239th Street. Both locations had become daily and nightly gathering places for dozens of teens openly smoking marijuana and dropping LSD. He leaves out the heroin. On weekends, the crowd at the monument could swell to more than 100. Mr. Edelsack didn't wait for teens to come to the Riverdale neighborhood house. Instead, his lanky frame, scraggly beard, and mop of red hair became fixtures in the places where teens congregated. His philosophy was simple: engage the kids in worthwhile pursuits and they won't have time for the mischief. Though he looked like a hippie, he made abstinence from drugs and alcohol a requirement of participation in his activities. So this is a requirement. So Richie Stein is being unequivocal here. He's saying that under no circumstances did Pyser Edelsack ever tolerate the use of drugs at the Dome. Eric, am I wrong about that?
It's written right here, and I want to give some of the biography that Richard kindly gave me. Richard, when Susan, Mrs. Pyser's wife, Susan, put me in touch, she called without me on the phone, and she says, he'll be glad to speak with you. God bless you, Susan. I wish you'd come on. We're not against your husband or anything. We're just analyzing things logically. Richard Stein said to me, he was actually the architect. When she said he was the architect, I thought he was the mind behind it.
No, he was the architect to build it.
It was Pyser Edelsack. Richard, though, after the architectural period of designing it, he had to live 50 miles away from Riverdale, and he lived in Delaware County in Delhi, or Delhi. He made a joke of it being Delhi because Roy Singh, who was at the Riverdale neighborhood house, was Indian, and Pyser had been in India. But he did not know mostly what was going on all the time there, he said to me, because he got a conscientious objection leave from serving in Vietnam.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he, at a church.
Right. By the way, Mary Ellen Gibbs just this morning confirmed with me that she slept out there in sleeping bags. There were kids sleeping out there. I mean, Richie said it would only happen one night, but that's another inaccuracy in his, comment.
I think, let's say, it would be inaccurate. May I say this? It would be inaccurate if he were to say this was the whole story of the Dome and sleeping. I think sometimes people don't speak coherently enough, and you and I pick up literally what they're saying. If I think about it, maybe he means they didn't sleep in the tents after while the Dome was being built. He said there was a thunderstorm and they left and never went back. But weren't there tents there also?
All I know is that the only person who said that the kids and the adults never slept out there. Now, we're not saying in the same tent, and we're not making any accusations, but we are saying that Tom Martin told us straight up that the adults were in one tent, the kids were in another, and it was like a nightly thing. Mary Ellen Gibbs, who was a Dome person who helped build the Dome, she told me she slept out there in sleeping bags, and there were tents. I mean, we're hearing nothing but...
And Mark Barron. They took a trip to Vermont and camped.
Oh, right, with Pyser Edelsack and Mark Barron and a couple other people.
And elsewhere, they're going to come to New Hampshire. They go.
And also he told us that Mark Barron also told us that Pyser Edelsack brought him to a elitist's house in Riverdale on Palisade Avenue when he was trying to solicit funds for the Dome. So Pyser's bringing Mark Barron everywhere. I mean, I'd be curious to find out more about their relationship. But all right, I want to get back to the meat of the matter here.
I think you're right, though. Historically, there is a disconnection. I wasn't saying you're wrong.
Right.
Being maybe too good a guy, but there's an historical disassociation, disconnection that has to be clarified.
So now what we're trying to do is, again, bring up the internal contradictions here, how what's on paper didn't actually happen in reality, which then makes me question the whole thing. We just learned that Pyser Edelsack's whole deal was anti-drugs. We just learned that the Dome was started as a place that drugs were strictly prohibited from, absolute abstinence. Richie Stein paints him as a modern drug warrior, in fact, in that obituary. Now, look at this article from the Riverdale Press before we get to actual testimony, a video testimony. Look at this article. I'm sorry, from the New York Times. This is from that article that we showed last week. Young people at the Dome did not deny that problems existed. Our rules are there's no drugs and no drinking here. If somebody smokes a joint outside, we ask them to leave the area. Hello, contradiction.
That's
if
right.
there's no drugs, why is someone smoking a joint?
And why are they permitted and not dissuaded from going to smoke marijuana in the woods, as Mark Barron told us?
We were told that there were drugs everywhere around the Dome, that they were always smoking weed. Weed was everywhere. It was mainly weed, not that big a deal. But for a project, right, Eric, that started to get kids off of drugs, it seems like they just took the drug addicts and brought them to the drug users. I'm not saying to say addicts, the drug users, brought them to the Dome where they continued to take drugs right in front of Pyser Edelsack. In fact, let's take a listen to Tom Martin, one of the original Dome people, and he's right here, okay, just so everyone can see. This is from the Dome book. You're about to see this man speak in modern 2023, specifically about drugs and Pyser's attitude at the Dome about drugs. Contrast this with what Richie Stein just said about absolute abstinence. Here we go.
But did it become just like a haven for local druggies, even though it was supposed to?
It was never really a haven for local druggies.
It never was.
No, I mean, how do you define a druggie? I mean, these were.
Well, I'm talking like the. Well, no, you know what I mean. Like, I'm not trying to be like that, but the whole point was that it was took these. You said heroin addicts off the streets of Johnson Avenue and the Monument, but did it just then redirect them there? Like
Pretty much so. Instead of hanging out, nodding out in the street, you could nod out at the Dome.
So that was it. So instead of nodding out on the street, you could nod out at the Dome. It was perfectly allowable.
That's right. It's right there. And also, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That paragraph, topics of major concern, from that social service agency's article. It's contrary to what Susan told me, that the Dome was never meant to last.
Exactly. Now, Ishell is saying wrong. So Ishell is going to come on tomorrow and put us straight about this.
But I wonder what she means by wrong. What they're saying, that it's meant to last, or what Susan said?
I think she was talking about the drugs, not the what you just mentioned. I think she was replying to Tom. All right, so we're gonna get Ishell on tomorrow, and we're really looking forward to it. Actually, I really like Ishell. I mean, even though we're probably politically somewhat opposite, although probably not really. I mean, I'm anti-war, I'm anti-police brutality, I'm pro-freedom, I'm pro-love, I'm pro. I'm actually a classical liberal from the '90s, never changed. I just don't get with all this woke crap. And also the cancel culture so extant in left-wing politics nowadays. But I'm really looking forward to Ishell coming on there. Yeah, she was talking about drug use. She's confirming this here. And we're going to get her on tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to it because she is fantastic, a great person. So anyway, so we just saw that there were some potential contradictions there, that this place was started to be anti-drugs. Pizer was an anti-drug warrior. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing that the truth is you could nod out at the Dome instead of over at Seton Park. Hey, if you smoke a joint, just go over there, and so on and so forth. We're not done with Tom. Let's let him finish.
What was Pyser Edelsack's thoughts through all this? Was he very anti-drug? What was his deal? Let me see what that is.
Pyser's pretty cool. I think he was more like, it's not going to do me any good to tell you what not to do.
Right. Right, I get that.
But isn't that interesting? It's not going to do me any good to tell you what not to do. But here we have numerous articles where he's talking about what he's going to do and how we're going to.
He's categorical. He makes it 1, 2, 3. Not only this is what we're going to do, this is what must be done to accomplish our goal.
Exactly. And just as a final nail in the coffin to show that this was all about fighting drug abuse, social services agency team up to fight drug abuse in Riverdale. Okay. And now check this out. All of our Alfred Howell connected things here. Riverdale YMYWHA, Riverdale Mental Health Clinic, Riverdale Neighborhood House. The organization met for the first time in November 1970, has been holding regular meetings. Topics of major concern discussed at the last meeting on December 16th, including the development of a comprehensive plan to combat drug abuse, also plans for a Spuyten Duyvil Youth Center under the Neighborhood House sponsorship, the proposal for construction of a geodesic dome in Seton Park. So here we have again the dome being shown and reported as an idea to get kids off of drugs. That did not happen. Drugs were rampant at the site of the dome. If Ishel has something else to say, she'll come on tomorrow and tell us we're wrong. But we have heard from several people, Eric, that drugs were absolutely rampant at the
historical conflicts. Now, one thing about Alfred Hunt Howell, when you mentioned the why, he was involved with the Young Men's Christian Association. He might have been involved with this, but this is specifically Young Men's and Young Women's Hebrew Association.
Oh, right. That's right. That was not Howell. That was maybe he was associated with them, but he was
He might have given the money.
Right. WMA. Right. I was wrong about that, but he was connected to Riverdale Neighborhood House.
When you hear you weren't wrong. When you hear the word "why," you always think of YMCA.
All right. So now moving right along, because we have quite a bit left to do, and we're almost at an hour and 40 minutes. So here, Mary Ellen Gibbs is in the thing. Wow. Hold on. She's saying, wow, I was right about everything I told you. So Mary Ellen is a fan of the show, and she was also a dome person. So we're going to get her on, and we want people who aren't fans to talk to us too. Again, we're having a conversation that needs to be had. 50 years later, we have actually, in my opinion, some mental wreckage of this dome project. Some of the people that we've spoken to are, by their own admission, like have a lot of mental issues, and so we are just wondering, what did this dome actually do to help people? Okay, so hopefully we'll get people on. So Pizer then is charged with getting kids off of Johnson Avenue and the Monument, off of drugs, getting them onto something positive. He has this whole plan. Enter Buckminster Fuller, right? And of course, we know, and we're going to have Ishel talk about this tomorrow. Apparently, Pizer got enamored with this guy, Buckminster Fuller, and brought a whole bunch of kids down to see him speak somewhere.
With Richard Stein. Richard Stein told me we took our kids, and all of a sudden I thought maybe your children of your husband and wife. No, the children. But this is before the dome was ever being built. And he showed me a book. This is how we ended up Zooming from a telephone call. The Dome, not the Dome people. And that's where Edelsack became enamored with Fuller's geodesic dome, which had been first put up in New York at the New York World's Fair from 63 to 64 by Robert Moses as a private project. He did not want any New York government involved.
Right. So we're not going to read this whole article. Again, we're going to put this up on the air. We went over a lot of this in our first show, but this is again from the Riverdale Press, and it's just about this guy Buckminster Fuller and his philosophies. And man's money drive is a result of him being born hungry. We want to keep refueling ourselves. Meanwhile, Pyser Edelsack is coming down with all that Brez Foundation money and Riverdale Neighborhood House money given into him by the Dodge Copper Mining Company. So there's even internal contradictions there within the philosophies that these people are espousing and the actual reality of who's funding them and where they're getting their sourcing of funding. So that's
where they went in Manhattan. This is Manhattan College and College of Mount Sinai. Whereas Richard Stein didn't tell me where they went in Manhattan, but Ishel said they went to Alice Tully Hall to see him speak.
Right. Actually, this is after the dome was built. Now that I'm looking at the date, it's irrelevant because we're talking about Buckminster Fuller in general here.
Yeah,
but this article is actually after The dome was built. This was again, just having some issues here. March 15th, 1973. So this was after the dome was built, and it even talks about the dome being completed. So this is Bucky Fuller. This isn't the event they all went to. We'll get from Michelle tomorrow where they went, because she was part of that group as well. So then they're finally building the dome, right? And look at Pizer. Everyone's digging the geodesic dome. Now, he didn't come up with this headline, but look at this. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is just with the time period, but why are they using all this counterculture language? Like they're not telling these kids to like be God-fearing. They're not telling these kids to love community and to respect the police. They're not telling these kids to appreciate your families and to be good students. They're giving them all this claptrap, as we're going to learn about biofeedback and transcendental meditation. We're going to look at all this stuff. And they're using all this counterculture language. I don't know. Was this good? Here, women's liberationist, right? Look at this. Women's liberationist who insisted on being treated as an equal gets her turn digging in one of the 16 foundation. Do you think she really? I mean, give me a break. So here they are, social engineering also the public with early first wave feminism, which of course was extremely destructive to male and female relationships and destructive to women in general. It just put them into the workforce so they could pay taxes to the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, they went through a sea of bureaucracy with permits, but they finally got the permits and everything.
Right, exactly. So here they are, and we're going to put this up on our website. We're more concerned not with the granular details of all these articles. We're more concerned with the overriding philosophy and the internal contradictions within this project. Okay.
There was a comment of somebody who says, "I see nothing wrong with this whole project." Nothing.
Oh, right here. I don't know, man. I'm not really seeing anything sinister here. This was a super complex problem that people still don't know how to deal with. Okay, let me just answer that real quick. Fair enough, but what about these contradictions? Why is Pizer this anti-drug warrior on paper, but then letting people nod out at the dome and not being, and also a contradiction from the obituary that Richie Stein wrote about him? But Eric, do you want to answer this?
Well, it's quite possible right now he doesn't see anything sinister, but you're overlooking what Manny pointed out, the contradictions about drug addiction, and also
wait. Sorry, Eric, and wait till you get midnight. Wait till we get to what they were teaching the kids in the dome. We haven't even gotten anywhere near that yet.
Midnight is correct. There was a super problem that they haven't known how to deal with. That goes to what I said. We still have the drug culture today.
Right, exactly. So anyway, just getting back to this article here. This article, I'm going to put it up on my Twitter. It's all about the dome and the construction of the dome. It's a means of providing technical assistance to the youth. There will be one, this is all stuff that really isn't necessary to read through.
One thing that's a gold mine here, my friend.
Tell me.
Read the data. You read the date of this article.
Thursday, December 9th, 1971.
Before the dome was built, right?
Correct.
Now, remember when Susan said to me the dome was never supposed to be permanent, and yet we have language about it being permanent, about it being for the youth.
When we get to Undercurrents, we're going to read that it was supposed to be.
It's here. It says here in the first column, the structure will be used as a community center for Southern Riverdale until it is no longer needed, or until the Department of Parks wants to use the land for another purpose. At the present time, no such facility exists in this area. So
you missed the top here. Edelsack's report said to construct a temporary structure.
That's right. Yes. So Susan is correct. So this is very odd, and this is why I asked. Richard said that Pizer was disheartened when it closed, but he already knew it was going to be temporary. And when I asked Susan, how did Pizer feel psychologically, emotionally? He put his heart and soul into this, and you can't deny he didn't, based upon the writings we've read. She said he wasn't hurt emotionally or psychologically. He just moved on.
Right. He just moved on. He didn't seem
Left the Bronx, and that's it.
right. He didn't even really seem to
Oh no, he
care
didn't
about
leave the Bronx. He went to the alternative
he's-
school for learning.
yeah, he started a charter school on Fordham Road. But
That's a very curious piece right there.
So Eric, we've already come up with several contradictions. One, this whole dichotomy between the flowery language of getting kids off drugs, yet creating a place where drug addiction was benignly tolerated, if not encouraged. Maybe not by Pizer, but certainly by the youth who were not being supervised properly. Okay, so there's one thing. Two, the Pizer wanting to start this project, but yet it was temporary. It was never meant to last. That you're setting yourself up for disaster right there. But also, we cannot forget, because Midnight Lightning Radio talked about, oh, there's nothing sinister here. But Pyser Edelsack was a socialist. Richie Stein told you that, according to what you reported back to me, Eric, right? Straight up, that did Richie Stein actually say that Pyser?
Yes, he did. And it wasn't, and neither he nor I meant it negatively. I said, what was his political philosophy? And later on, I'm going to read something, and you will all understand why I'm putting forth this question.
Right. So now we have this internal weird contradiction with the drug issue, and now we have all these mental health associations associated with Pyser Edelsack and the Dome. Okay, so there were definitely mental health people at the helm of this. Maybe not there every day, although I have my questions about that, whether they were there at the Dome conducting psychological things with the kids, and not meaning nefarious. Okay, but we also have this very, in my opinion, sinister political indoctrination that was happening, not even subtly, at the Dome. To me, the Dome had a complete Maoist bent.
Let me first say something, Manny. This is very important, and you're not giving an opinion. You're giving a fact because of that one sheet I had found that Tom Martin gave us. But on that other one, geodesic dome, that's not supposed to last forever. There are certain little points I'd just like to read out. The dome will provide year-round shelter, as well as being flexible enough to be moved, dismantled, and expanded or contracted as needed. The structure will be built entirely with volunteer, community help, and expertise, engineers, architects. Okay, the architect is Richard Lee Stein. Who the engineers are, I don't know. But why I'm pointing out that this dome could be easily moved is because that seems to be the original type of dome they wanted to build based upon Buckminster Fuller, and we were giving beautiful, detailed, meticulous architectural design workmanship by Mark Barron. When they went to Palisades Avenue, how he showed them they built one that was about 3 feet high,
right,
and how it could easily be moved and changed. So that was the original the purpose of how they would build that. And then, of course, here it says they will assist the youth in creating, operating, and maintaining their own programs. The project workers will set as catalysts and technical assistants for the youth. 2 youth are Michael Shapiro is the playwright, the boy playwright, and Jim Rosen was the boy photographer and cinematographer who sadly commits suicide later.
John Rosen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of contradictions here. So this is what concerns me the most. Okay. This not so subtle political indoctrination of the youth at the Dome. And it only went one way. Okay. These kids were not learning about God, country, civic responsibility, proper use of firearms, lessons in civic responsibility and Constitution. They weren't learning anything like that. Let's take a look at what they were learning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the Undercurrents newsletter. And this was all given to me by Tom Martin, who you guys saw.
It become
here.
just like a haven for local druggies.
We were actually
supposed to.
Give me a second. Let me mute that. We were actually you're actually looking at this file here that you see him carrying. All of these are original Dome papers, which included the original Undercurrents, and this is a scan from those documents. All right, so give me a second here. Let me get that back up. So beautiful artwork, actually, by Alphonse Gavila. I asked him if he's still drawing. He said no. I said, well, you better start because I want a logo for my show. And hopefully he's listening to this and he'll take the time to do one in this style. But this was the newsletter written by the Dome. Now, we're not going to read this entire thing in full because it's just too long and it's going to make your eyes glaze over. But the beginning of it, I think, is very instructive because, well, let me just read it. And yet another short history of the Dome. It is highly unimaginable that a conscious member of Homo sapiens sapien could exist in this year, 1973, without ever having heard of a geodesic dome. Untold millions of people have had their ears assaulted untold millions of times. So millions of people should know. And some proclaim to know just what a geodesic dome is. Why is it then that when I seek some response from the Riverdale public, I am met with the mute stares deserving of one asking road directions in Serbo-Croatian? Far be it from me to allow a public to wallow in its own ignorance. I feel forced to dispel this dark cloud which lowers over their collective heads. Geodesy, far from being an exclamatory comment on one of Homer's better efforts, is described by Webster as I can't read this anymore. This is getting crazy, but
I think this might have been written by Pizer because, well, who knows? No, not Pizer.
I don't think this was Pizer. I think this was one of the kids. But talk about cultic. First of all,
I think of Bernard Stein because he goes into Homer. The Greek poet and things. It's quite erudite.
Right. And it talks about the struts and everything. But the whole general tone of this is like the Khmer Rouge kids. It's like us kids are the height of humanity and civilization and culture. And you lowly Riverdalians, you don't know about the dome? You brutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I'm interpreting this. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no. There is a kind of elitist thought, but whoever wrote this is a person of literature. They're using metaphors, like asking directions on a Serbo-Croatian road. Maybe he traveled and then remembers he couldn't speak Serbian, Croatian. It's an erudite person who's written this piece. And everything about literature and also about the architectural design, every single item used from tar to nails to resin to shingles.
Right. So this is where it gets a little bit more interesting because now we start to talk about the politics behind the dome. Okay. And again, I don't see anything here that would resemble God-fearing, community building, family loving. The dome is like a whole cultural symbol to me of getting in touch with real energies, cooperative and not competitive. That's communism right there. Cooperative with Tao and with one another. Huh? What? Huh? I like the way it looks like a breast coming out of the earth. I can see the dome growing into a free space, like another culture, environment in the middle of Riverdale. How do I see Riverdale? In other cultures, which are closer to the land, which are not so obsessively compulsive about individual careers and rigid sex roles, I have felt something else. There, childhood is a time of natural learning instead of being controlled, and adolescence is a longer growing time, 12 to 35, in which people choose from both. Now, I got a lot of problems with this. First of all, this is straight out of Pizer's mouth, right? Remember the beginning of the Dome People? The Out of Space movie where he's talking about how he saw Riverdale as a place obsessed with money. So right here, that came out of Pizer's mouth and it went directly into Steve's head. And now Steve's writing it. So it seems like this was indoctrination.
I've tried to find Steve's family name. I can't find it on a list I have.
Why did I decide to work at the Dome? I don't know exactly. In a way, it would have been easier to take one of several other more highly structured jobs I negotiated for, but I am looking for something. I have friends who left the city and gone back to the land to live, some as couples, others in communal groups. They do not see what they are doing as dropping out or running away from complexities. In many cases, they made a conscious decision to leave careers to try to work out gradually new lifestyles. I have memories of happy hours spent in an outhouse in New Hampshire reading the Whole Earth catalog. and a month spent on a co-op farm in Georgia trying to build an economic alternative to sharecropping. Huh?
He must have been pretty constipated.
It's ridiculous.
In an outhouse, that catalog was this thick.
Yeah, right. So that was his. All right. I mean, we don't want to make fun of this guy.
It just happened.
For all we know, he's watching. But all I'm seeing here is this is like something out of like This seems to me like a hostage situation. He was just telling the hostage keepers what he wanted to know, what they wanted to hear back. But anyway, it could be.
And is really looking for something beautiful in life.
Right. So the best of their child creativity and spontaneity. I don't understand where that went. Hold on. And the social roles and cautions their parents offer on the other hand. But in Riverdale and in much of America, there is no adolescence. So now we've gone into bashing America. Okay. For the problems that were created by the same elite that created this dome and financed this dome.
But
right?
This could be indirect foresight that the adolescence and the beauty of youth and the romantic thoughts has been destroyed.
True. Instead of time and space to grow, I only found stifling pressures to succeed before I could even get to know myself in any feeling way. Pressures put on me by people who spent a lot of their time denying who they were. This was ridiculous. At first, I tried religion to get some breathing space, but it put down too many of my feelings, especially anger, and only provided a really solitary outlet that didn't change much. Okay, so first of all here, now they're dissing religion. Now, I'm not a religious person, don't get me wrong, okay? Mm-hmm. But religion plays an important role in society in gluing communities together and keeping people behaving properly. Let's just put it that way. Now, I'm not a moralist here. I know all the issues in the Catholic Church and with the religious uber religious people, but here he is in the pages of Undercurrents dissing religion. That's a hallmark of communism.
And also, if you mention the Catholic Church, it's the 60s, the Second Vatican Council, which destroys the church and seemingly continues a so-called church, actually leads one to dissing religion and its discipline and so forth.
So let's carry on and see what else gets torn down in this. Then in the 60s, I tried movement politics. I learned some things, but there were still too many external roles and ego trips. I used sex and drugs, both for my own good and self-destructively. Looking back, still trying to put my head together with friends, I see one thing under it all. Not enough free space and time to grow and not enough tools. Somewhere in Riverdale culture, it is hard to get room, even inside my own head. What the hell's this guy talking about? I grew up in Riverdale. I had plenty of room, including in my own head. Anyway, this sounds like Pizer has his hand up his butt and he's moving his mouth. Okay, because that's exactly what Pizer said at the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. It is easy for me to get into authoritative, uptight parent roles and cut off a gentle, exploring side of myself. This can also happen in groups where we shame each other to play authority roles to cut off interaction. It is also easy for me to get locked into child roles where I see all structures as bad as my parents' structures. Underneath, I have found that I am often still dependent on their values, and I end up in a rage that either I turn on myself destructively or on other people. Groups often get locked into this conflict instead of looking for alternatives together, maybe working this out as part of the search. I don't know if this makes sense, but it leads into what I want to say about my skills. I have some tools in group dynamics, mostly working in small groups to try to further creativity and negotiating, my own and others. These are tools that I want to develop and share. These are different from you've got a problem, social work type approaches. I see them as tools to be passed on, perhaps by forming a peer-to-peer counseling training group where we could pick up information on group interactions, sex roles, drugs, tools to do for ourselves. So right here, this sounds like a lot of mental health stuff going on.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say after who I think might have even written this, but continue.
In terms of actual program, I already feel as though I'll be learning more that being a resource person, I see myself as one of the dome people with my own tools, working for new ways to live and express myself. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, ancient Zen saying. And then one final thing here. I believe no one can tell anyone else how to live. The answers are in each of us, and a place, a free space that is there only so we can share, is only there so we can share our experiences. I am glad to be here. Steve. Now, we're going to get into this message from Pizer to the Dome people because there's some contradictions there as well. But what's your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I wasn't trying to be vulgar when I made a joke about the outhouse and reading the whole Earth catalog. You know, I'm not a vulgar, scatological type of person. No, it was interesting because I forgot the name Steve. So when I heard the Buddha thing and the discipline, I thought of Tom Martin because he always was into the martial arts and judo. That kept him alive because he suffers from bipolarity. He's open about it.
Right, and he also, and I mean, maybe he used a nom de plume, I don't know, but this was an adult for sure who was working at the Dome.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds, it could be a man called Steve, but everything fits into sounding like Tom, who's quite an erudite man. And, you know, the discipline, I tried this, I tried that, I tried religion. And it sounds like somebody who kind of found his way to health through the martial arts.
Possibly, but one of the underlying themes here to a child reading this is religion ain't going to help you, career isn't going to help you, parents ain't going to help you. You're on your own, kid. You got to make it up in your own mind, which is highly destructive to a child.
And that's really not Tom Martin.
Correct. Tom was very into helping the kids.
Yeah.
So let's read this, a message from Pizer to the Dome people. Okay, because again, remember everybody, Eric told you before, this Dome was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be temporary. Okay.
And we have it written there. I found it. I found what Susan told me, and it's right there in what we read before.
But listen to this. This is what Pizer was telling the kids in the newsletter. Many days of strange and wonderful time together, and still there is more to do. We have built a building, and now it is time for the space we have enclosed to come together and reflect all our love. The Dome is our place because we built it. The Dome will be a place for young people to be together and expand their sphere of influence in their own community. We have proven that young people can do for themselves. It is now time to begin the process of relating our building to the world we live in. Does this space have creative potential for the people who built it? Or is the purpose of the Dome just another rip-off spot for decay in an already decaying world? I am committed to seeing the Dome become an arena for the creative and caring people who work so hard to make it a reality. The Dome will move in a direction set by the people who choose to participate in the process that operate the Dome. For now, that is the town meeting. The neighborhood house is committed to that process, the town meeting, and will respect the town meeting's decisions. We have much to do. Let it be done with love and peace. Well, we're going to talk to John Scanlon about Pizer's approach to love and peace next week. But
I wish Susan would come on. He's deceased. But this is very important. Does this space have creative potential for the people who built it? Or is the purpose of the Dome just another rip-off spot for decay in an already decaying world? That's a very important question there.
I actually think he was trolling everybody. He knew it was another rip-off spot for decay in an already decaying world.
Or was he hoping that it would not be what originally in 1971 they said would be temporary? Was he hoping for that? Was he in contrast to the politicians and the psychologists? Because later on, as we've discovered, he's not a mental health worker. He's a street worker, a community worker, a youth worker. And that could be where, as Richard Stein told me at the Alternative School for Learning, it's a psychologist who didn't like Pizer, and that's how Pizer left that school.
Right. He said some psychiatrist didn't like Pizer, and we'd love to get that story. Because listen, everybody, you can't have sickness without health. You can't have dark without light. You can't have good without bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We're coming to this story from a different perspective. Now, let's carry on because we have some serious. This is the pièce de résistance. And Sam Smith.
6, I think.
Sam Smith and Midnight Radio. You're going to want to pay attention here. Eric, take it away.
Okay. As I was going through Tom Martin's thing, I came across this. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it made me think. I'm sorry. of a lower echelon type of MK Ultra. I'm not saying it was. And then also, it's why I asked Mr. Stein, Richard Lee Stein, what Pyser's politics were. I'm not insinuating anything. I don't care. I've known communists. I lived in a country that had the biggest communist party outside of China and Soviet Russia, Italy, for years. But you'll see why I asked that question. On the left-hand side, Laurie Goodman and Karen Freed wrote the following about the Group Dynamics Workshop. An evening of discussion about planning different workshops leads into an experience of group dynamics. We had assumed that it would involve much time and effort in organizing a group such as this one. So therefore, you see that they were also doing it before and hoping that it would organize their group there. Without realizing, we had already started an introduction to group dynamics when Alphonse Gavila, a community social worker well known at the Dome, led us in a simple mind game. Mind game, yeah. So therefore, this group dynamics workshop almost makes you believe that this was going on outside of the Dome, but was affiliated with what went on in the Dome. Two things. Richard Stein laughed, saying, "What? Alphonse Gavila, a community social worker? Not at all," you see. And then mind games. Alphonse Gavila told us he doesn't even know why they're using that word. He doesn't know what they mean by mind games. So it goes on. This involved putting two qualities from yourself into a coin, giving the coin to someone else in the circle in which we were sitting, and explaining what the qualities were and your reasoning behind giving the coin to that particular person. The reaction from the group's participants reflected curiosity in continuing the workshop. Two of the participants, Lester Franklin and Ellen Mintzner. Now, there's Ellen Mintzner, who would become the head of the Dome after Pizer leaves, and Lester Franklin, a man called Lester, is referred to by Mark Barron as having been an ex-convict with hard knocks written on his nails.
Not on his nails, on his knuckles.
On his knuckles, yeah. Knuckles.
So here we have an ex-con leading these with hard luck on his knuckles, leading children in the Dome in a mind game. Okay, go ahead.
Also, social workers at the Dome. He calls these people are called social workers. Also, have had experience in leading groups of this nature. So these groups of this nature, dynamic group workshops, have taken place before the Dome, in the Dome, and now they're describing Goodman and Freed outside of the Dome while the Dome exists. The purpose of group dynamics workshop is to find out more about yourself through others and getting to know each other better. This group is only the beginning of other planned activities at the Dome. So they plan to have this at the Dome. Now, mind games, maybe they made a mistake. It's improvisation, and they put mind games because Gavila doesn't know what they mean by that. But why the mind games stood out for me is that there's something printed on this page, the Dome Theater Collective. And this is exactly why, my friends, I asked Richard Lee Stein, what was Pyser's politics? And I'm not saying this is his politics, but I had to ask it. The Dome Theater Collective, now a sign-up list on the wall of the Dome, is open to all people who wish to work with other people to create their own plays, visions, experience, and environments. We have that happen. Michael Shapiro, John Rosen. A collective is a group of people who progress towards a common end by sharing their skills, ideas, times, criticisms, experiences, and energies. Now get this. Collectivized farms and industry in China have helped eliminate centuries of hunger and deprivation. This is why I asked about Maoism.
That's highly offensive. That's highly offensive to me. This paragraph right here.
Yeah. Participants will enter first into the collective and then assume theatrical roles in demand. No one will work the lights if we choose to perform in the darkness. You could read something hidden into that. Everyone will exercise choice and involve themselves in the creative process. The result, Sharing with the dome's community will glow with the intensity of the energy given off by its creators. This is an experiment in the release of the potential energy of the dome's people. If you desire to work with others to create a dome, a play, respect other people's abilities and desires, learn it as you do it, then place your name on the list on the wall of the dome, and we will initiate the process 1 day a week to start together. See you at the launching pad. Okay, nothing's wrong with that except for that piece, which is Maoist communism.
Oh, collectivized farms and industry in China have helped eliminate centuries of hunger and deprivation. Sorry, the true history is collectivized farms in China have killed millions of people and brought on widespread famine and hunger. What the hell are you talking about?
The human beings were used as manure for the soil. The whole point of Mao Zedong was not an agrarian revolution, although they had a big agrarian culture, they continued, but it was to create a China that was also industrialized, and we see that today.
Right, exactly. So
Thanks
I don't.
America and Europe abandoning its own people, putting them out of work, and opening the businesses up there.
So forgive us, Dome people. Forgive us, Richie Stein, Buddy Stein, everybody who we've spoken to. Who, by the way, from what Eric reported back to me, you all enjoyed talking to him greatly, and you all had a great time talking about this. Forgive us if we seem a little strident here, but we're constitutional, freedom-loving Americans in this station, and we're viewing this claptrap through that lens. This is communist propaganda, straight up. We don't see anything in here but from the John Birch Society. Not that I would want that, but what would happen if someone, Eric, what do you think would have happened if someone went to this Dome Theater Collective and started talking about how communism was evil and how great America is and how the Vietnam War was great?
I think they would throw the person right out. They would throw the person right out. Now, you mentioned the John Birch Society. They had a lot of intelligent authors, and they were writing about these things going on, the Frankfurt School, social engineering, and so forth and so on. Supposing somebody showed up there and said, I don't like your collectivization theory. I prefer Mussolini's corporate state. You might even be attacked and hit and thrown through a window or whatever.
Right. Listen, I was dealt a severe blow by the progeny of these people in 2021 when my entire business and career was canceled because I refused to put on a mask. And also I was telling people, hey guys, the hospitals are empty. This is all bullshit, which is now all, of course, coming out to be as true now. In the recent revelations about how this thing was a lab leak and how masks don't work. Even the New York Times is writing about that. I lost my career for that. And I lost my career for that at the hands of people very much like these at the Dome, who are into this collectivism and communism, and they truck no dissent. And so this is why I'm saying that there was one ideology being pushed here at the Dome, and it wasn't good. It was all about drugs, free love, communism, collectivism. Let's worship Mao and all of this stuff. This is not cool.
No.
And I just wonder what the effect of this was going down the line. I would love to hear, like, how did these kids evolve politically? Are they now are any of them conservative now, or are they all still pushing this claptrap to this day because of the way that they were? Huh?
Yeah, well, of course they're still pushing it today, and the people who push it at top are multimillionaires.
I also want to know exactly. I also want to know, and it's in this article again as well. I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but 5-member committee aids Dome programs. I want to know why there was an ex-con working at the Dome. Like, I think we can.
Do we have a date for this article?
Huh?
Do we have a date for this?
No, unfortunately, we don't. But there seems to be something with ex-cons and these elitists in Riverdale, because we heard that another ex-con was working at someone's house.
Now, here's interesting. Lester Franklin is directing the theater workshop. I would have liked to have known what Scott Redmond had to say about that.
I looked up Lester Franklin, and apparently he was associated with this thing called the Phoenix Repertory Theater, which I wasn't able to get too much information on. But Mark Barron told us Lester Franklin was an ex-con with hard luck tattooed on his knuckles. Now, he could have been the nicest guy on earth. Maybe I Shell tomorrow will tell us that the guy was a teddy bear. But
If it's the same Lester, though, he just said Lester, and
right,
then
he didn't give us the last name, but Lester this is the only Lester we found associated with the dome.
That's right. And this is where I'm questioning Ellen Minster and the date of this article, because I was told she took over when Pizer left. But yet we have other articles that say that she was always there. She was the directress of it and so forth.
As a parent, would you have allowed your child to play mind games in the dome in the middle of the Seton Park woods with an ex-con with hard luck tattooed on his fingers? I personally wouldn't. So listen, we have a couple more things that I think are going to bring it all on home for the audience once they see the programs that were being pushed onto the teens at the dome, and we're over 2 hours, so I want to go through this very quickly. I think it doesn't take much time to make our point here. And again, we're just using articles from the Riverdale Press. We're not making this up. This isn't coming out of our imagination, but we are interpreting it through a lens that maybe you guys, especially if you're coming at us as a pro Pizer, you probably never heard this stuff before. Hopefully you're learning a thing or two and seeing that the world doesn't work in the way that you particularly want it to or think that it does, that there are other people out here with differing opinions. And Richie Stein does not own the dome story. It's not his to interpret for the world. This is a public story that I am obsessed with now because I'm seeing a lot of red flags. And I know in my heart that someone's going to come out of the woodwork with horror stories about this place. And we are looking for the good, and we are also looking for the bad. I've never made any mistake about that. I never misinterpreted that whenever I speak to people about this. All right, so let's look at.
I want to ask your opinion.
Yes, sir.
How much of that Maoist propaganda and what was written do you think Pizer was in agreement with?
Well, I don't know. I can't say because I wasn't there. I wasn't with him. I never spoke. The only thing that I'm doing is making connections here. We were told that Pizer was a socialist, and here we have Maoist collectivism propaganda being pushed on the kids. So I'm just putting 2 and 2 together, that there was an endorsement of that.
Yeah.
Okay, now again, I could be wrong. Someone come and please tell me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Pizer was the brainchild behind the dome, and it was his philosophy that started this dome, his socialism that guided the ideology. And I believe that there was almost a cult that, and not a satanic cult, not cults that are doing this stuff like we talked about in Son of Sam, but I believe that Pizer was almost like a cult leader, and that he had his disciples among the young 13-year-old, particularly girls. The boys seem to not be as into Pizer as the girls.
Liza Rifkin told me, and she even, and
Lisa Rifkin,
and she has her memories. She cried a bit when I spoke with her. And she said he was a wizard. He didn't have to die. He was a wizard, and he deserved a prize like the Nobel Prize.
Right. Which, of course, we can interpret in another way because Nobel invented TNT. The people who get Nobel Prizes are all warmongers. So anyway, but let's talk about some of the programs that were there for the kids, because I think this is going to be eye-opening. Well, first of all, 1976. So this was way after Pizer's time. But the Riverdale Neighborhood House was still doing stuff at the dome, programs for the dome. So mental health clinic. Okay. So Richie told us that there were no mental health professionals associated with the dome. Eric, is that correct?
Yeah, he said there were no people there. I told him that Gavila gave us 7 names, and he said there were none there when he commented.
Well, here we go. The clinic, so the mental health clinic, and this is from the Riverdale Press, right? 1976. The mental health clinic expanded its off-premise services this year, reaching out to residents of the Riverdale Manor, Riverdale Senior Center, and the Marble Hill Senior Construction Consultant. Also were provided at John F. Kennedy High School and the Seton Park Dome. So there were definitely mental health services being provided at the dome. There were definitely mental health professionals at the dome. And we just saw that they were playing mind games with the kids at the dome.
And something else that is extremely evil and subversive. I went out with a woman, and she took me to one of their churches, godless stained glass windows, worshiping just nothing, anti-religion, even though they claim it, the Ethical Cultural Society.
Yeah, that's another thing that we're going to have to look at.
We have to look at that deeply, deeply, deeply. But look at further below. Services of the Adolescent Drug Abuse Program and Aftercare Program for those who have had psychiatric hospitalization are available also to residents of Kingsbridge Heights. These poor people, psychiatric hospitalization from narcotics and so forth. It's tragic.
All I know is that when Riverdale Mental Health came on board in the late 60s, all of a sudden the mental health of Riverdale took a way, way downturn. All of a sudden everybody was on drugs, and now look at Riverdale. It's destroyed. These people have been voting Democrat ever since the 1970s. We have the same politicians in office. Riverdale is a shell of its former self. Everybody's walking around with masks still. Well, not everybody, but quite a few people are. And Riverdale was one of the biggest locations of COVIDianism that there ever was. The mental health of Riverdale is not good. So these things are abysmal failures, first and foremost. And you got to wonder whether there was another agenda for their rise. Now, check this out. Dome Health Fair will focus on topics for teens. The Riverdale Neighborhood House has announced the health fair will be held on April 23rd at 3:30. Interesting. Jason would love that. Panels, discussions, and films for young people will be featured, centering on subjects in the forefront of young people's consciousness. The health fair will include human sexuality, VD, birth control, abortion, and drugs and their abuse. Okay, guests will include representative from Planned Parenthood, Odyssey House, Project Total Family, District 10 Drug Program, the City Health Department, the Bronx Narcotics Squad. So here you have these foundation-funded operatives, again, in the Dome, teaching kids about VD, birth control, abortion, drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Seems rather advanced, but this is where it gets interesting.
Yes, wait, but below there's another name with Ellen Minsner, and they're the contact, David Stone. I don't know who he is. I never heard of him, but Ellen, if you're listening, I still want to speak with you.
Right, and I think you guys should clear the air, because we're bringing up serious issues, looking at this history that no one's ever looked at, and we're looking at it with a stink eye. You guys aren't looking very good. You're teaching kids Maoist indoctrination, and then check out what they were teaching them next. This is 1976 again. Okay, so to be fair, Pizer was not here, but the Riverdale Neighborhood House was still doing its thing. The Seton Park Dome will present a special 6-week program to open its Well-Being Resource Center. The program includes lectures and workshops in Batik, Tai Chi, Gufeng, acupressure, massage, lifestyle groups, herbology, nutrition evaluation and information, basic music theory, transcendental meditation, biofeedback, psychic healing, yantra art, and bioenergies. The focus of the program is to provide alternative lifestyle ideas to young people.
Right.
Eric.
The era, all of what they read before about the mind and the body is very positive. It exists years before, but they call it then an alternative lifestyle. So they're using something beautiful to manipulate them for an alternative lifestyle. All of those things have nothing to do with an alternative lifestyle. You could be a traditional person and do Tai Chi, transcendental meditation, and all of that. So that was used.
Yeah, and again, we're just seeing the breakdown of traditional social structures that worked up until that point. America was a powerhouse until 1965, 1967, at which point it all went downhill because all of these baby boomers started going crazy, getting propagandized by the CIA and getting into all these tune in, tune out, drop acid. Timothy Leary, another CIA agent, dealt with that on my show on Grand Royal Magazine. These kids were not learning good things that were going to help them in the world. They were learning destructive stuff that led them nowhere.
Yeah, well, people would say, even the rock and rollers of that period, you could do all of that. And if you want to go get high and space out on LSD, you can. The two don't go together. They do
exactly
not go together. How many people are in Riverdale? How many people would you say at that? What's the population of all of Riverdale? The ward of Speet and Devil, everything. How many? I want to make a point.
I'm not quite sure. Several 100,000 for sure.
Okay. I come as a child from a hamlet. I'm on once again. I never thought I'd get back here. At the time, 79 homes. I come back from Europe and I hear that about 30 people from 79 homes died from drug addiction.
Wow, it's huge.
Do you realize that on a hamlet, a traditional hamlet?
And look at all the and look at all the kids that were nodding out on drugs in Riverdale. I mean, again, this was being taught to them. These kids weren't just doing that because all of a sudden they were somehow different from kids in the 1950s or 1940s. They were learning this by the elite tastemakers, even if they didn't know it. Now, check this out. I shall, who we're so looking forward to tomorrow. You must remember the curiosity of youthfulness. I get it. Youthfulness are curious, but it wasn't the youth that were coming up with these programs. It was the adults teaching these to the kids. The kids would have no idea that this stuff even existed.
Easily be manipulated. I just want to tell one more story. I came back to visit my parents from Italy in the early 70s. A boy who was very patriotic, very conservative, joined the Navy after high school. This kid comes back blowing a joint and speaking about Mao Zedong, and he learned that in the U.S. Navy. There were change agents everywhere.
I hear you. And here's our second to last slide. I know it's been a long show, and thank you, everybody. And this is just my own little curiosity. 1974, dome to hold video workshops and videotaping. Okay. The Seton Park Dome, under the auspices of the Riverdale Neighborhood House, is offering a videotape workshop beginning on Wednesday. Okay. The workshop is open to all young people aged 13 to 20. The 10-week program will focus on the creative potential of video, in which the participants will explore a wide range of techniques and approaches. The workshop will include exercises in videotaping with emphasis on visual expression. Charles Gilbert, who has been working extensively with video, will lead the workshop. Contact Ellen Minster. Now, this is 1974.
Yeah, so Minster is a major player all along.
But videotaping in 1974?
Well, that was not often done. I mean, when I saw a video machine that recorded from a television, even in 1976, this economist and his wife had it in Westchester County. It was fascinating. They were big, they were bulky, rudimentary, but they were strongly made. Videotaping.
But think about this filtered through our lens of Son of Sam, right? And what we've been talking about the last couple of years. In this dome project, we have elites, children, drugs, isolation in the woods, videotapes, ex-cons, motorcycle gangs, photography, right? And you're going to tell me nothing bad happened? Get the F out of here.
And what does that tell you when you get to Rothstein and the abduction of children and the intelligence people showing children being used for sex and taping foreign diplomats to blackmail them, or the Carone brothers taking children from an orphanage in Brooklyn and giving them to others and taping them?
Right. I mean, listen, we're not making any accusations, but this is looking awfully hinky to my eyes, and maybe yours too out there. Now, I want to end today's show again focusing on this subject of and this personality of Pyser Edelsack here with Scott Redman. Okay. So this socialist, right? This is a foundation-funded socialist from UCLA and was in the Peace Corps, who doesn't know the first thing about Riverdale, coming in and socially engineering Riverdale's youth, and in so doing, having far-reaching effects down the line. Quite a few of these kids ended up becoming, pretty prominent in left-wing politics. I don't want to name names, right? Social wreckers in and of their own right. So this guy right here has some things to answer for. And I'm sorry if I'm not sitting here as a hagiography and treating him like an icon. This guy, I don't know this guy anything. Who's he to me? Other than somebody who I look at as a potential offender, and I'm trying to see if this is working out in the real world. If it isn't, I'll be the first one to tell you. Okay? But all I know is that filtered through our lenses of what we have discussed the last 2 years, this dome project is looking seriously warped. And I'm wondering whether there was another agenda that the kids weren't even aware of, where they were being used as some sort of social engineering experiment by these elitists and these foundations. Eric, take it away.
Well, I agree completely with you. It had to be that. It was an experiment because they stated from the beginning it was not meant to last. What Susan said was exact in that article I had never seen. From the beginning in 1971, this was not meant to last. But yet you have the contrast, the perplexing contrast of Pyser Edelsack being ever so doctrinal and dogmatic that it is supposed to last.
Right. And then, of course, we have the other internal contradiction with Pizer, where he's supposedly this anti-drug warrior, allowing kids to nod out in the dome and saying, "Hey, if you want to smoke a joint, just go over there." And Tom Martin saying, yeah, his attitude was, "It doesn't do me any good to tell you what not to do."
And Mark Barron saying, yeah, in the evening we'd leave and we'd go smoke in the woods. He said that to us. You were on the phone with me.
Mark Barron was talking about all sorts of rampant drug use of weed and LSD, maybe not LSD. I don't want to put that word in his mouth, but definitely weed at the dome. And I'm sorry, I'm not a moralist, okay, about weed. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't smoke a joint until I was 22 years old, okay? These kids were 13 years old, 12, 13, 14. This is not cool. And the contradictions are just too big for me to ignore, and we're not ignoring them. Eric's last words, and then I'll take them out.
Well, Sam Smith said something very well. It's subliminal, but it's true. He says, just look at the advertisement on one of those ads of a drawing of I think a semi-nude woman. The concurrence of view. It does mean something today. I'm not a Puritan. We have a beautiful nude painting in my parlor, but it's Sam Smith said something. It might be the previous article, but nevertheless, it's a point to be made. Everything means something, and I wonder who Stanley Simon is.
He was a local politician. I believe he was he might have been the borough president, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, I think we've covered everything so well. We're not making accusations. The facts are there. The contradictions are there. I mean, in fact, it's not even, the story is ambiguous, but the paradox is clear. There's a this and a that, and how do you connect them? There's too much that's left unanswered. We already established it was not supposed to last forever. Susan Edelsack Cole was correct. Then why was it so dogmatic? Why was it supposed to be a haven to help kids? If it's not supposed to last, where were the kids going to go for help then?
Right, and also Pyzer's supposed to be this incredible guru-like leader of these children, and he was actually, and everyone cares about him, and then he just leaves after a year and doesn't even he just leaves and doesn't even really care. He's on to the next project.
And why was Alphonse Gavila made to leave, go to the junior high 141, and then there were those who were begging for him to come back?
Well, anyway, these are all things that we're going to talk about. Eric, thank you so much. Epic show.
I thank you very, very much. And it's a fascinating study. And let me just say to everybody, we haven't left the Howell murder case. We haven't left Karen Wallstrom. This came up because of Howell's wife, who's the literary publisher. Manny found the book, The Dome People, written by her, the words. And wait until you hear something from Mary Ellen Gibbs
regarding Son of Sam. And Mary Ellen, don't give it away in the chat, okay?
Don't give it away at Mary Ellen, but after all, Son of Sam led us here.
All right, Eric, stick around. I'll say goodbye to you off the air.
God bless you. God bless everybody.
And also, let's not forget that I was in the dome. I was in the dome as an infant because it was torn down by 78. I couldn't have been any more than 5 years old, probably about 3 to 4 years old when I was in that dome. I remember being in a stroller. I remember looking up at the ceiling and seeing triangular, multicolored pattern triangles, plexiglass, it seemed like to me as a child. And I remember all these hippie kids dancing around. And that memory has haunted me ever since that day. I've never brought it out of my mind. And while I don't think anything nefarious happened to me at the dome, it definitely set up something in my brain where I am extremely curious about it. And of course, knowing what we know about the New World Order and about how these elites love to fund subversive groups, and about how foundations are sending their operatives out to all these neighborhoods, and how mental health is a way to subvert culture and get people on your pharmacological drugs and destroy communities. So what? So the same industrialists and the uber elitists who created the problem could then capitalize on the other way around it as well. These people love you sick and depressed, sitting in your home, watching their television, buying their products, taking their drugs, and eating their corporate food. They love it. The question is, are you going to continue to be a pawn in their game? All right, everybody. Please tune in tomorrow when we have the great I Shell coming on to tell us why we are completely full of shit. All right, guys. Take care.